back here, the BBC named their Women's Footballer of the Year, and it's a man. I'm sure you have to look at the picture. It's a man. It's a player, officially a woman, who has failed.
But why do they keep doing this? They didn't have to give the award.
Well, I mean, there was a nomination, so people were voting. The thing I found most disturbing was all the female players.
I know.
Clapping away when somebody who was quite clearly born a man, who may have been assigned female at birth incorrectly, is winning their award.
I know.
Women really wake up. Where are the lionesses, by the way?
Yeah, well, they never speak up, do
ladies,
they?
Do you mind saying something?
There was a woman from the BBC who called the Telegraph disgusting because they actually ran a headline that was truthful. Unbelievable. Anyway, Julia Hartley-Brewer coming next. I'll be back tomorrow at 6.
Smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
And a very, very good morning to you. This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. And whether you are listening on DAB Plus radio, on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or on your connected device, it is lovely to have your company. Back to another miserable day, certainly down here in London. Know what it's like around your way, but hopefully a little bit better. Absolutely grim. We are very much into winter territory, are we not now? But I don't know about you. I've been having a little bit of a chuckle today. I've got to be honest with you. I woke up to the news and actually burst out laughing because once again, Auntie Julia's been proved right. Have I or have I not been saying this for quite a few years right now? Net zero does not survive contact with reality. Those net zero targets, every single one of them, the 2050, the 2030, the EVs, the electricity, you name it, every single one of them is a pile of absolute, abject, illogical, unaffordable, undesirable, impossible madness. And yet again, I've been proved right, because today we now know we're going to get a statement from the Business Secretary, Jonathan Reynolds from Labour, about the net zero rules on electric cars. Why? Well, because there are rules about electric cars. They want people to buy electric cars. Not only has there been a lot of subsidies to try and get people to buy them because they're more expensive and they haven't got much resale value because of those very big, very expensive batteries. Oh, yeah, they don't go very far. Oh, and there's nowhere to charge them. Oh, and electricity has gone up, so people don't want them anyway. Apart from all of that, the manufacturers have been pushing them. Well, they've been pushing them really hard. I'll tell you why. Because they've all put billions into manufacturing them, to putting the factories together across Britain and across Europe, because they were told they have to sell them. By 2030, they were told, you're basically going to have to sell nothing but brand new electric vehicles. So, of course, they put the investment in. They had no choice. And until that point, with rising scales every single year, they're going to have to sell a minimum number of electric vehicles. This year, it's 20%. This figure is staggering. £15,000 fine per vehicle that is sold above that quota for non-electric vehicles for every single manufacturer. Basically makes it worth their while to not sell any cars at all than face such a massive hit. Why? Because you can put them on the forecourt, you can put them in adverts, you can push them as much as you want, but people don't want to buy electric vehicles for all the reasons I've listed. And because just basically the British motorist on average is just far too sensible and clever to fall for this madness. And so what is going to happen? Well, car manufacturers like Vauxhall threatening to close their Luton factory could see 1,100 jobs go. That's just in the factory, let alone the fallout in the local community. They basically are forcing the government to change their ways. They're going to have to do something to change those fines, something to change those rules. I told you, net zero does not last past any contact with reality. We're going to be talking about that. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that as well. Also going to be talking about that 60-day ceasefire in Lebanon. It's begun at 4 o'clock UK time this morning. This is after Israel and Hezbollah agreed to a US-backed peace deal, which sees both sides withdraw from southern Lebanon. Also, militant trade union bosses. We're going to be talking about them in this hour. They're organising a pro-Palestine demonstration across hospitals and schools and elsewhere across the country, including calling on teaching and medical staff to wear Palestinian flag colours at work. Shouldn't they just dress in their appropriate uniform at work? This has been accused of creating a hostile atmosphere for British Jews, let's face it, which is exactly what it's supposed to do, isn't it? We'll talk about that. And Britain's sickness benefits bill is set to rise by another whopping £1.3 billion. I mean, expecting we'll pay that a day at some point before the government launches its welfare review. It's a review into the sickness benefits. They're not actually guaranteed to do anything, as we discussed on the show yesterday. But analysis by the Tories shows spending on sickness benefits is ballooning at a rate of £266 million a month. But by the way, Tories, this happened on your watch, so you're the ones originally to blame. So sorry, you don't get to carp on about it now. We're going to talk about all of that and plenty more besides. I'd love to hear your thoughts on particularly on the government watering down strict net zero rules for sales of electric cars as manufacturers basically face a lack of demand from motorists despite all these big fines for them. Just want to know what your reaction is, other than just laughing your head off as I did this morning. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. You can text the word TALK to 87222. You can put a message on X at Talk TV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1, standard network rate message. I've got another question for you as well. We'll get to that in a few minutes. First up, though, delighted to welcome Conservative commentator Benedict Spence and his Movember Tash back to the studio. Good morning to you.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm in my Saddam Hussein phase.
I have to
That's
say,
where we're going.
We are in Saddam Hussein territory.
Yes.
I just like to say, just on the issue of the Tash, given I'm in a cheery mood today because of the EV fallback, I'm wondering, is it your moustache that makes you run late every morning?
Yes, it's wind resistant.
It's winding you down? Is it weighing you down? Is that what it is?
No,
so
it's
very late to the studio.
Again, in my Saddam Hussein era, I'm now on Arab time, which is to say I could turn up on time, but, time is infinite.
A lot of people are going to complain about that, but if you've ever been in the Middle East, that's something they actually talk about.
They themselves will not complain about that. They will laugh.
Yes, it is actually
it's a thing.
Yes. When people say we're doing it tomorrow, or the other tomorrow?
I think it's actually one of those things, isn't it, that they say that time is one of those sort of colonial white supremacist constructs because everybody else is expected to keep to it and they don't fancy it. That's an actual line of argument.
And there we are. There's so much I want to get to. Let's talk about net zero cars. The Vauxhall, basically the owner of that company, basically says EV rules basically behind the decision to shut their Luton plant, costing 1,100 jobs.
It's not a surprise. It's something that's been forecast for a very long time. Europe's economy
by people who can add up. up.
Yeah, Europe's economy generally, not just the UK's, is in a desperate situation, and great swathes of this is due to energy prices and net zero policy. I mean, if you want to see how badly things are going, just look at the fact that the German government's just collapsed. You know, that pinnacle of stability and success that we're all supposed to mirror, that's actually in an even worse situation than we are.
Their industrial base is absolutely collapsing.
Factories that have never had economic problems are closing, people are being laid off, it's a complete disaster. But, you know, for as long as we have ideologues in charge of policy, both here and abroad... Hi, Ed Miliband. Hiya. This absolute fixation that, if you just keep on going fast enough and hard enough, it'll happen, which, oddly enough, is the attitude, of course, that many communist countries took towards communism. Well, if we just did a little bit more communism, or indeed if we just did a little bit more fascism, then people would see a point.
To be fair, both communism and net zero policies lead to the same place, poverty.
Yeah, although the communists did at least build houses. That's one thing that you could say. They're
not very nice houses.
Not nice ones, but they built
not very nice houses. Don't get onto what Mussolini. Don't get onto what Mussolini did with the trains. Don't mention that.
You got shot if you didn't build the houses.
But this is the thing. It is so mad. Now we are expecting there's going to be a bit of a rolling back on this. Now Ed Miliband were very unhappy. The Energy Secretary, Energy Security and Net Zero Secretary, laughably, not going to. Neither of those are going to happen. Love, they're mutually exclusive, but neither of them are going to happen. But this is the thing. Motorists will simply not be browbeaten into buying these things. Now, for company cars, there are a lot of financial incentives to encourage people when they get their fleet of company cars, they lease them for them to be electric vehicles. So those are sold to those companies. And basically, apart from that, and that's only a minority of the market. Otherwise, it's ordinary motorists going, what car do I want? And they're still going, I'll have diesel or petrol, please. Yeah. I can reliably, fill up the car. I can reliably get somewhere. I can get it mended easily. It's got some resale value. Oh, my God, if they kept the EV rules, I mean, I'm going to buy 3 diesel cars the day before the rules change. Keep them. They're going to be worth a fortune. I'm going to make my millions from this. We are going to still be using diesel and petrol cars for many years to come because they're reliable. I know so many people who've bought an EV who are really regretting it, especially... We're told all this rollout of places to charge. They're not there. How long it takes to charge, how much it costs to charge. And again, barely any resale value.
How frequently you have to charge and how long it takes to charge did actually inspire me an idea that we could bring back the coaching in, because actually every 200 miles you'd have to stop to feed your horse, charge your car. But of course, it wouldn't be the worst idea. Pubs would make a comeback, but of course, this being the UK, we'd then have self-driving cars, which you wouldn't be allowed to stop and have a drink just in case, because that's the attitude that we have in this country. So you'd stop, and this car would theoretically drive itself, because that's the direction. You'd recharge it, and you have to sit there twiddling your thumbs and maybe having a carrot.
It's just this is the future, guys. I'd just love to hear your thoughts.
This is the Ed Miliband future.
Ed Miliband future. By the way, Ed Miliband does not have much of a future, but don't worry, he'll get some super duper job at some point at some international body where he can cause more havoc. But I'm saying, chickens coming home to roost, guys. But the people who can add up, the people making the cars, and the people who are buying cars with their hard-earned money, or paying the lease with their hard money, they don't want these cars. So what are you going to do? Are you just going to force us to have them? Funnily enough, people are just going, well, we just won't buy a new car then. And I mean, I love the fact the great British public are refusing to be conned by this madness. Guys, I'm loving you today. I think this is hilarious. I think the fact that this is all falling apart. I said it would. It's happening even sooner than I'd hoped it would. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. If you're a massive big fan of the EV, give us a call as well. I'd love to hear all different sides on this. Let's also talk about something much easier to discuss than the net zero policies, and that's, of course, the Middle East. Israeli cabinet approved on Netanyahu's recommendation a US-backed peace plan, a deal last night. Came into force at 4 a.m. UK time today with Hezbollah. Hezbollah forces, what are left of them, withdrawing from southern Lebanon, where they're not supposed to be anyway under UN rules, because the UN cares a lot about rules and amendments, unless, of course, it's not Israel doing the wrong. And Israeli forces moving back from there. We've already seen many Israelis who've been moved from their homes in northern Israel driving back to return to their homes. How hopeful are you about this ceasefire holding more than the 60 days?
Actually, quite hopeful. Hezbollah's lost. It's lost. That's why they're...
How's that working out for you, Hezbollah?
The terms of this ceasefire are pretty punitive. Israel can go into Lebanon whenever it wants if it deems that the Lebanese army isn't doing its job. And they will, and they can strike them at any time. The leadership's been completely wiped out. This is a severe humiliation both for Hezbollah, what's left of it, and for Iran.
And can we have just another little moment over the pager attack, by the way?
That was brilliant.
I mean, just
but again, it really flies in the face of the suggestion that you hear from people in the UK that Israel is the aggressor and isn't interested in ceasefires. It's absolutely interested in ceasefires once it gets the mission done. And we need to be very clear here. If it wanted to, it could have carried on deeper into Lebanon. It could have killed a lot more people. It could be occupying southern Lebanon.
Actually, I mean, certainly comparison with Gaza, because the people aren't being held sort of hostage effectively by Hamas in the same way. That's
different population density.
So when it's very difficult to clarify, isn't it? Because when Israel is a genocidal force against the Palestinians, bizarrely not so in Hezbollah in Lebanon, but it is in Gaza. So difficult to keep up with propaganda, isn't it?
But you know that it was always going to be the case that this was going to be a very different war, and many people actually thought that this would be the more difficult conflict because Hezbollah was that much larger. But obviously Israel has proven that it has infiltrated Hezbollah.
They've taken out something like 90% of their weaponry, and as you say, their entire leadership, a huge number of their
and
fighters,
their replacements.
And their replacements. I mean, there was just a point when genuinely every day another person basically don't go in the job of being the leader, because any moment now you're going to be toppled. Well, we'll talk about this with I think Andrew Fox coming up in about half an hour's time. Let's also talk about stuff closer to home. BBC. Here we go, guys. The BBC Sports is naming their Women's Footballer of the Year. Now, I'm going out on a limb here. There was a time, old-fashioned as I am, when the Footballer of the Year who were women would be nominated only from people who are... Can you see where I'm going with this? Actual women. But no, the BBC, in their infinite wisdom, as a result of the mad lunacy that is at the BBC these days, decided to nominate one of the people up for this job, a player called Barbara Banda. Now, Barbara Banda is from Zambia and has been a very, very successful player. No doubt also nominated for the Ballon d'Or as well for women's player. The key thing here, though, is that the Zambian player had to withdraw from the 2022 Africa Cup of Nations match because he, and I'm going to use that term advisedly, he failed a sex eligibility test, heightened testosterone. He was basically DSD, which is this term, differences in sex development. So, like boxers in the Olympics, like some other athletes we've seen over the years, it's actually someone who has been believed to be a girl at birth, but was not actually a girl, was misassigned their sex at birth, and is actually male. And if you see pictures, I don't know if we can put a picture up of a Barbara Banda, is quite clearly a man. There's nothing about this person that is not quite clearly a man. He has been raised as if he were a girl and is a woman, but is genetically, chromosomally a man. OK, that's the thing. And yet he's been nominated. Now, he wasn't allowed to transfer to Real Madrid, having failed a sex test last year. Not allowed to play in the Africa Cup of Nations because he failed a sex test. He referred to as she repeatedly in all the articles about this, and he wins this. Now, it was a public vote on the nominees, but as J.K. Rowling has said, something about, the BBC basically decided it was more efficient to do this than going around and spitting in each individual woman's face instead. What is going on?
Right off the bat, that's never a sentence I expected to hear. Failed a move to Real Madrid because failed a sex test, so it broke down. I mean, that's never stopped Real Madrid before. But first and foremost, obviously this is something that it's increasing in frequency, and actually I think people are becoming a lot more aware of it, whereas perhaps once upon a time it might have gone slightly under the radar.
Well,
that's
only
also
one
partly...
or two. They're not winning anything. It's
well,
fine.
No, they are winning. That's the point. They're winning. They're really successful.
I wonder why male players are doing really well in women's sport.
Because we're really good, Julia.
Is there any reason why we decided to separate women's sport from men's sport? I just can't think why.
Yeah, and as the male supremacists in the room, I have to say congratulations, Barbara. You did a sterling job. That's exactly what I would have done if I could have done.
You're only saying that because you got your tash 1st of December. All that bravado will be gone.
Absolutely.
But it's such. I mean,
I could have won the female Ballon d'Or. Let's be honest.
It's something that would have been, in some satirical comedy show 10 years ago. It's now the norm. We've had, Kent's Cricketer of the Year, Women's Cricketer of the Year being, this is different from someone who's trans, who says, no, I believe, or I'm just simply playing at it. In the case of Leah Thomas, I don't believe for a moment Leah Thomas, the American swimmer, remotely believes that he is actually a woman. This is an insult to women. We've only just seen women's sport break through into the mainstream, women earning money, people paying attention, people going to the matches, going to watch the track and field. We've only just got that happening, and now we're going to allow it to be destroyed by a load of people who are actually really men, or know they're men and have played as men, have been average as men, and now are going to take women's medals and awards.
I'm chortling a little bit about it because it is ridiculous. But this
it should be laughed at.
Well, it is laughable. I'm unable to hold myself back. But this is the real sort of misogyny, if you like. As you say, women's sport begins to break through, and along come a couple of men and go, absolutely not. We're going to dominate this field and put you in your place. And if you try to complain about it, we're going to brand you the bigots. That's state-of-the-art misogyny. That's really well thought out.
It really is. Yeah. There's so much more I want to talk about, but I desperately want to play a video of the woman who could have been president-elect by this time of the United States and about to be leader of the free world, Kamala Harris. We thought we got rid of her, but no. She's decided to put out a bizarre, really quite lengthy video last night. I'm thinking a box of wine may have been involved. I'm not thinking a bottle. I've got to be honest with you. I think a box of wine may or may not have been involved before this video was made. But this is what the woman who lost the American presidential election, who, thank God, is only going to be vice president of the United States for a couple more months and will not be the next president. This is what she had to say to Americans yesterday.
I just have to remind you, don't you ever let anybody take your power from you. And you have the same ability to engage and inspire. So don't ever let anybody or any circumstance take your power from you.
Wow. OK, it's James Heal from The Spectator who tweeted this morning, but he was on Mike's show earlier, and it's so true. Very strong sort of nightclub, girls' toilet, 2 a.m., someone's just, he's dumped me, he's not worth it, sweetheart. Don't anyone take your power from you. That woman could have been the leader of the free world. No, I've got issues with Donald Trump. Oh my God, I've got issues with the guy.
The guy who's currently the president, who doesn't know where he is.
But wow, that.
To be fair, if you just lost to Donald Trump, I think you'd knock back a couple for a couple of weeks.
Vote for her because she's a woman.
I know, but I suppose that's why would we be surprised that this person then took to the bottle? If that's the sort of the high point of the tactical brilliance.
It could have been before then.
I think, well, this has actually been an ongoing thing about Kamala Harris, however.
I said I don't need to know how she pronounces her name.
Does she change how she pronounces it based on how drunk she is? I don't know. Honestly, but it's been well known.
I think just before then she was.
But it's been well known for some time that she enjoys a drink, and that's fair enough. Many great politicians have made a fantastic. Churchill won a war by being drunk. In fact, I think he won too. But actually, this is very undignified, and somebody should have said to her, "No, we're not going to put this out." I don't think someone
listens to advice, but there we are. I mean, as indeed neither do you or I. But there we are. Certainly, the government doesn't listen to advice from people who can add up when we get to your calls about electric vehicles. I also want to hear from you though on BBC, sparking, as Time says, controversy. Oh, do you think? By naming Barbara Banda, a player who has failed sex eligibility rules because he was born a man and is a man. Call him what he is, as it's Women's Footballer of the Year. Want to know what your reaction is to that? Give us a call on that as well. 0344 499 1000. Text or tweet 87222 and at Talk TV. I'd love to get all your messages on air up next, but do give us a call, have your say, and we'll be back with you in just a couple of moments. This is Talk.
not a huge change from anything that I've heard from any government this century, really. But I think the difference is that the situation is perhaps more acute now than it ever has been. I think there's something like 9 million people are out of work.
Yes.
That's double what it was before the pandemic. 2.3 million people on long-term sickness. And a shocking statistic shows that actually I think the welfare bill for long-term sickness is going to go up to something like £100 billion by the end of this parliament. That's more than like schools, courts and police budgets all put together.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Benedict Spence, some common sense coming out today. Andys Moustache, a Conservative commentator, still joining me. Lots of your calls coming in already, thick and fast, particularly on electric vehicles, but also on Barbara Banda, a player who has failed sex eligibility rules, being named as BBC's Women's Footballer of the Year. Although one of the nominees, they chose the nominees, but people voted. The worst bit about that for me, genuinely, was all the female players who were in the room with him when he won the award, all just clapping and cheering. It's like, are you all gaslit? Or they know they're on camera and they know basically if you speak out, you're out. You're called a transphobe and a bigot. And he may be a very nice person. I'm sure he is. It's not his fault he was assigned the wrong sex at birth, but maybe someone should break it to him.
Well, they have to play against him, so maybe if they're really two-footed tackle in the next
Yeah, I mean, generally,
this
worse
madness,
things have happened. It's sodding insult to women. It really is. So much to talk about. By the way, we're going to have Ian Duncan Smith on in just a few moments to talk about a lot of the other big stories in the news. First up, let's talk about EVs again. Nigel is on the line in Norwich. He's called up on 0344 499 1000, wants to have his say on electric vehicles. And, well, basically, the government we're expecting today is going to water down their strict net zero rules and fines for manufacturers simply because they can't sell the sodding things. Nigel, what do you want to say?
You've hit a lot of the main points, really, Julia. But what people sort of seem to forget as well, other than just the consumers of electric vehicles, there's a whole other industry around used vehicles. You know, like myself, I've been in the motor trade for 35 years, selling second-hand vehicles, and that industry will just be, completely wiped out because you can't make a living buying and selling second-hand battery vehicles. It just won't exist.
And why? I mean, again, I mentioned that earlier. And why? Explain to the people who don't understand why that is.
Because I've just recently bought one. I've been trading for a long time, and I've out of curiosity for myself, I bought a Volkswagen ID3 all-electric vehicle just to try to sell. And I've had lots of inquiries about it, but then people start to talk about the range and all the problems and all the things. And I basically agree with a documentary that I'd seen some time ago where the guy said, and I can't remember his name, but very fascinating, he said, once the leasing companies and the big fleet owners have, that when they've done their purchase allocation for EVs, that they've the deals they've done behind the scenes with the big manufacturers, and then you go to the next sort of tranche of people, which would be the tree huggers, all the people that
but basically, you get a load of companies. They buy a fleet, or lease a fleet, and they've got loads of these cars. They have them on a 3-year deal, leased out. Yeah. But once then they're handed on to the next person. But are you saying so the next people they're not going to buy them?
But that's farcical as well, Julia, because a lot of the manufacturers buy that business. They don't. How these leasing companies work is that they buy them on a zero holding sort of charge. So basically, you'll pay. Let's say you pay $20,000 for an EV, and they'll give you a buyback deal at $20,000 in 3 years' time. So it's just crazy.
I mean, that's what they're having to do to meet these targets. And this is the thing people don't realise. Genuinely, car manufacturers, £15,000 fine for every new car that you sell over and above your allotted quota for non-EV cars. But they can't give these bloody things away.
They can't, and that's again, that's why second-hand car prices. You just touched on it earlier before the break that you'll hold on to a petrol or diesel car for as long as you can, And, you know, it'll happen in other parts of Europe as well, where people will hang on to diesel and petrol cars and just will resist, you know, well, not the temptation, but the need to have an electric vehicle. They don't believe in them, they don't want them. So once you've now got to try and sell EVs to the masses, this is where the problem is now starting.
If they were good, if they were cheap, they were good, they had a good range, they had a resale value, if they were good, we'd buy them, we wouldn't need to be forced into it. That tells you that they're not good, doesn't it? It's as simple as that.
Well, there is, but I think also there's other tricky things that seem to be happening that I've noticed in the trade, that if you have I guess you drive a combustion engine vehicle of some kind.
Listen, this is how much I know about cars. I drive a grey car.
Right. All right.
I drive a grey car. No, it's a diesel. It's a diesel.
Right, okay, there you go. So a diesel car. So if you now pull out of a junction on the way home today, and God forbid, but somebody sort of hit you in the wing of your car and you had a slight accident, your insurance company, if you had that repair done on insurance, your insurance company are likely to categorise your car now as a category N, as in a write-off vehicle. It's not a write-off vehicle. They've changed the categories for N, non-structural damage, and S for structural damage. For more severe accidents, but your car is likely to get a category. That takes away the value. Once that's got that category on it, Julia, it takes away the value of the car by up to 2/3. So 2/3 of your value of your car is gone. And that's another thing that sort of seems to be creeping in. I've noticed that more and more category N cars on the market. Nothing wrong with them, but the values have depleted.
That's very interesting.
And what's happening is it seems as though there's another way of forcing us down a route that we don't want to go.
Get yourself a new car. Very interesting. I'm going to look into that. Nigel, thank you very much. Great call. Used car salesman, but I would trust him, Don Stipe, more. I would trust the government on this. Let's go to a quick call also on the Women's Football of the Year being basically, for all intents and purposes, a man. Stephen is in Mansfield. Hello, Stephen.
Good afternoon, Julia.
Hello, what's going on with you? You've been up early. It's 10:30, mate.
That's usually your boo-boo.
It is, isn't it? What do you want to say about this Footballer of the Year?
Yeah, well, I'm on your side with it. You know, it's clearly a man. If they'd gone and got a ladyboy from Bangkok or something and tried to make it a bit more convincing, then I'd be on...
I don't know where we're going with that, but I know what you mean. It's like they're not even trying anymore.
No, exactly. You know, and like you rightfully say, stick up for women's rights. You know, it's ludicrous. It's absolutely nuts. And call me a conspiracy theorist if you like. Why is it the BBC that are giving these awards out?
Yeah, because they're completely up on this stuff. Hook,
we know
line,
what
and
the BBC
sinker.
are all about. Is this a new wave paedophilia? Tell kids that, you know, men can be women, so that then they've got a different avenue to go down.
I mean, who knows? Who knows? I mean, I've got some very big question marks about the people who want to trap children in the wrong bodies and, in their view, and stop them from having going through puberty. I've got some very big questions about some of the people involved, and we've seen quite a lot of court cases related to that as well. Stephen, thank you very much indeed for that call. It's 10:32 is the time. We're going to take a quick break. Then we're going to be hearing from Sir Ian Duncan Smith about, well, all of the big stories of the day. Do stay tuned. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning to you. Welcome back to the show. Benedict Spencer with me. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer, and this is a Talk, the home of common sense. Lots of common sense, we hope, from our next guest. Ian Duncan Smith, MP, former Conservative Party leader, joins us. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Julia.
Thank you very much for joining us. There's lots of stories I want to race you because there are just so many excellent stories around. But what do you make of the government being expected to water down their strict net zero rules and, of course, their penalties for manufacturers for the sales of not enough electric cars? As manufacturers basically say, there isn't the demand. We're going to close. Vauxhall said they're going to close this factory in Luton, 1,100 jobs at risk. Other manufacturers saying they may well give up manufacturing here as well. What do you make of that, and do you welcome it?
Well, I just find this whole net zero government position, whether it's Conservative government and then followed by the Labour government, a kind of new appalling religion, which seems to be that this is the most important thing in the whole wide world. We, who have 1% of global emissions, must somehow be the leading proponent of all of this. I don't know why that matters to anybody else. And secondly, the previous government had realised they were heading off into a very dangerous area, which would destroy a lot of British industry. So they pushed back the time to get to net zero to 2035 again, which was at least the beginning of common sense. The first thing this government did was to drop it back to 2030, which is unachievable, let me tell you. And all it's going to do is lead to a collapsed British car industry, because cheap Chinese electric vehicles are ready now to swamp the UK market. They've said so.
Well, they say they're ready to swamp the market, apart from the fact that people don't want to buy those either.
I know, but my point is that, you know, any electric car that they do sell will not be made by a British manufacturer, and most of Europe...
But hold on a minute, don't you remember this whole green revolution was going to come with all those jobs, wasn't there? Weren't there 500,000 new jobs in the green revolution? When are they coming?
That's all bogus nonsense, I have to tell you. I can't think of a single...
I'm shocked, Ian, I'm shocked.
Well, maybe the government wants to spend lots of money on jobs where it doesn't work. But I was talking to a couple of electric car drivers the other day, my constituents, and they said the problem also is if you have an electric car and if you aren't able to fully charge it at home, the cost of charging now when you go out is staggering. Yeah. So they try everything they can not to have to charge their cars out, which means short journeys. They can't use their cars properly because they're not flexible enough. The whole idea of this is, I think, a classic case of when a peculiar religion takes hold and grips everybody.
But it all started under your lot.
I know, not me. I'm telling you,
not you. I know, not you. You've been saying all this stuff all along, but your lot did this.
I warned Boris. I thought he was taking a turn for the worse on this. Everybody else has had to leap up and down, bearing their great apparent green credentials. The problem is this has to be done logically and carefully. All sorts of alternative fuel supplies, like, for example, various different types of gases, etc., that could be used. And none of the money was spent on that as it should have been. If you go and talk to JCB, they've converted all of theirs, and they're not using electric vehicles. They say they don't have the power. There's so much inflexibility to us getting onto one-track pony here that is really damaging. Will damage British industry, will put the cost up for British consumers. We have the highest energy costs now in the developed world. People wonder why manufacturing industry is genuinely talking about leaving, because this whole net zero drive has led to this staggering increase in costs.
And we all knew that this is what would happen. The unions, I mean, one of the only bits of hope I've got is the trade unions, like the GMB and others, have actually been pretty sane on this stuff and say, well, hold on a minute, people are going to be losing jobs when you're pushing this because of manufacturing. But they're also not necessarily that same when it comes to some other things. Militant union bosses, we're told today, including organised by the Trades Union Congress, but got Unison, National Education Union, the usual suspects, Stop the War Coalition, the Palestine Solidarity Campaign, obviously involved as well with this. They have all been accused of creating a hostile atmosphere for British Jews by organising pro-Palestinian demonstrations in the workplace. They want a workplace day of action tomorrow in the workplace, asking people to turn up to work, whether they are teachers or medical staff or social workers, wherever they are, to turn up wearing red, green and black clothing and badges in support of the Palestinian cause. Now, wonder what you make of this in terms of the level of concern this will cause for many of our fellow Jewish citizens to have people supporting the flag of an organisation which, well, you know, and frankly has been associated with, because it is associated very much with Hamas, perpetrated the most horrific massacre on Jewish people since the Second World War.
Number one, you shouldn't be politicising the workplace.
Yep.
Because there'll be people of different views inside that workplace. And Jewish people already feel terribly threatened. I have a Jewish sister-in-law who told me the other day she's never felt more scared about being a British citizen in the United Kingdom or in the whole of her life. And these are the voices you don't hear from. And if somebody puts up this protest in the workplace, just think how all those who don't share that view will feel scared stiff, will feel threatened, imposed on. This is not what democracy and freedom of speech is about, because it becomes an intolerance, and it's not freedom, then it becomes imposition. And my point is, right now, we should be doing less of this. What we have to do is, obviously, we want ceasefire, and we want at least human rights to be observed in Israel, and Gaza, but what we don't want is for the streets of Britain to be turned into a surrogate campaign, and that is nonsense.
That's pretty much where we are, though, sadly. And we saw a horrific attack in northeast London on a bunch of teenage Jewish girls. I don't think that far, actually, from your Chingford constituency, where one of the girls has been hospitalised with facial injuries, a man throwing bottles at the girls and hitting the girls. Again, it's fascinating, because a lot of people talk about this, you know, return to the 1930s. Gary Lineker seems to be very concerned about return to the 1930s when he's tweeting sometimes, but, you know, doesn't seem to be concerned about this sort of return to what we saw in the streets in the 1930s.
Yeah, people are very selective about all of this. The truth is, there is only one position to take, that peaceful protest in the right areas is okay. That's what our right allows us. It is not right, it is intolerable for you to impose your views on others such that they cannot use spaces such as work, such as public places, because they'd be worried about being intimidated out of that. And it all comes to the head over this nonsense. And so I think that the original position was the police would only agree to marches and to protests so that they weren't continuous, so that people had the right to protest, but not all the time and not in people's faces, as it were. And I think this is where it's gone on. And I would say to the police, who I happen to think are rather badly led at the moment, generally, which is, instead of chasing people for the odd comment or two, what they should be doing is chasing people committing crimes on the high street and making sure those people are locked up. I mean, everywhere's got this problem with shoplifting, where the shoplifters are brazen. They stand there and they basically flick two fingers at the police and go in and rob £10,000 out of boots, etc. So that's what we want the police to be doing, and to crack down on protests that are threatening in any shape or form. Yeah,
absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more. Big announcement yesterday from the government about tackling welfare benefits and a massive ballooning cost, and a lot of talk also about how they're going to have this review on tackling sickness benefits, which we've seen particularly ballooning since the COVID pandemic and lockdown policies. Not seen that in any other Western country. It's peculiar to this country. You were Work and Pensions Secretary for a number of years under the Cameron government. It's your big mission to sort of basically bring all the benefits together, deal with universal credit. I think you're the only benefits secretary who's actually managed to, welfare secretary, to actually, you know, cut the number of workless households in your time in office. We're certainly not seeing that happen anymore.
Yeah.
What do you make of what the government has announced, and do you think it'll achieve anything?
Actually, just for the record, we had the lowest number of workless households since records began when I left. Voluntarily, it has to be said, resigning back in 2016. So that was a critical.
So it is possible to do it.
Yeah, but the big problem has always been sickness benefit now, and this was a benefit that was originally set up under the Labour government. We've all struggled with this one because it's very difficult. Once people get onto the upper tier of it, as it were, they're never really checked again, and nothing ever changes, and so their lives get more miserable by being on that benefit. And some figures that are really interesting is that, first of all, that most of the new claims to sickness benefit, and particularly after COVID, are mental health problems. Yeah. And the majority of those claims are for anxiety and depression. Now, anxiety and depression are very, very curable conditions. I'm not saying it's easy, but lots of things like talking therapies and others, if you deploy them early enough, you can reconcile them and bring them round. The second bit of it, of course, which the health service exactly agrees, is that work is a health treatment, particularly for depression and anxiety. You get more depressed sitting at home with nothing to do than you do if you go to work, you meet other people, all that sort of stuff. So on that basis, we should be targeting that particular core of people. It's a subset of those with mental health. Now, when we did this in the Centre for Social Justice, we found that 700,000 of those who are on sickness benefit want to work.
No, they say they want to work.
Well, this is the interesting thing.
These are different things.
Well, hang on a second. A lot of them are working illegally. So what happens is they go into the black market because we set this rule about 16 hours of work you can do. What happens on the margins of that, lots of people then want to work, and so they're scared stiff that if they declare that, of course, what will happen is they'll get punished. My view about this is that we should say to people, we'd rather you go to work than not work. And now, and this is the big thing that's going to happen, which the government should latch on to, sickness benefit at last is coming into universal credit. It wasn't before, it was meant to. Successive governments didn't want to spend the money on it. The key thing to this is it puts everybody on sickness benefit in front of somebody for the first time. Now they can have their case reassessed. Now they can get treatment. We have to get that done for them. And now they can be helped to go into work. So with that, what we should let universal credit do is taper away that benefit as they do more hours, because we want them to work. So that's what I would do straight away.
Okay, just finally, and I have to be briefly, if you wouldn't mind, Sir Ian Duncan Smith, assisted dying bill is coming to Parliament on Friday. Ongoing debates. We've had 3 former Prime Ministers, none of them sitting MPs anymore, but Boris Johnson, Theresa May, and I've forgotten who the third was now. Who was the third one? Liz Truss. Easy to forget. Sorry, Liz. This is a very short period. Those 3 have weighed in and saying they will not be supporting this bill. Are you going to let that sway your thoughts at all?
No, I just think this is the wrong way to go about it. I think that if you want to do this, if you want to really talk about it, then we need to do it under full government time with full government requirements. Such
Not with a
as
5-hour debate.
Impact assessments, all that sort of stuff, because what will happen is you're going to get this switching and moving. I won't be supporting the bill on Friday because I have concerns about creep, which is my biggest problem, and I just want to know how you stop that happening, because it hasn't happened in other countries.
Okay.
But we don't have time really to look at that impact.
I think people get also about 2 minutes to speak on Friday if they want to speak. Sir Ian Duncan Smith, I'm going to cut you off. I have to leave it there. I've got to go to a break, but thank you so much. Covered a lot of ground there. Sir Ian Duncan Smith, former Conservative Party leader. Up next, going to talk to Andrew Fox about that ceasefire in Lebanon. Will it hold? How significant is it? And what does it mean for Gaza as well? This is Talk, the home of common sense.
Look and see what happened to Hezbollah over the past year since it decided to start a war on the side of Hamas. Hezbollah lost much of its senior leadership, including top warlord Hassan Nasrallah and his successors, many of its senior fighters, its jihad council, and right on Israel's border. We're talking a few football fields away from the villages in northern Israel. You go over a couple hills, you're inside Lebanon, you're in the villages. Hezbollah in these villages had a massive military infrastructure, rockets, tunnels, positions that would enable Hezbollah to carry out a surprise invasion of Israel.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning to you. This is Talk, the home of common sense. Benedict Spence, I'm going to bring you in just very briefly on what Ian Duncan Smith had to say, just on particularly on the benefits issue. Do you have, we talked about that a lot on the show yesterday, do you think there's any chance at all we are going to see a benefits issue being resolved by Labour?
No, I think to be fair, I do think that they'll try. I think that they have recognised that it has got to a stage where, you know, if you're cutting so many other things whilst trying to say, don't worry, it's not austerity, but your taxes are going up and so
they actually realise it's a problem.
You do need to actually find some things, and this is a huge area of waste, but I don't think they have the spine for it. I don't think that they... Physically, it will repulse them to have to actually stop giving money to people.
To anyone who asks
so
for it.
I'm sure that they will try to think up some sort of scheme.
There'll
probably be a new command task force to go into unemployed and sick areas, but it's not actually going to do very
and again,
much.
a new logo for the job centre. That's all very interesting. Well, look, I know you want to give you a tuppence worth and over the course of the show on the next topic. About 4 o'clock in the morning British time, we did see the start of a 60-day ceasefire between Israeli forces in southern Lebanon and Hezbollah, the largely terrorist organisation that has pretty much taken over military control of Lebanon. Let's talk about this with Andrew Fawkes. He's Defence, Middle East expert and research fellow at the Henry Jackson Society. Good morning to you, Andrew.
Hello, Julia.
Thank you very much for joining us. Well, I mean, so first of all, is this ceasefire a good deal for Israel? Because although they have done incredible work, basically, I mean, really damaging Hezbollah forces, have they actually done enough in terms of damaging Hezbollah forces that Hezbollah is no longer a threat to them?
Well, we'll know if the ceasefire holds, because on paper it seems like an excellent deal for the Israelis. If we look at their war aim, the whole reason they went to fight against Hezbollah in Lebanon, it was to enable northern Israelis to move home from where they've been displaced since October the 8th last year. And that threat took two forms. First of all, it took the form of rockets, and then secondly, it took the form of Hezbollah attack tunnels on the border from which they could launch another 7th of October style attack. Israel has degraded Hezbollah's rocket stocks by about 80%. So we're down from 130 to 150,000 to just 20% of that total left, which is still a lot, but it is a huge reduction. And the tunnels have been destroyed en masse, and we saw yesterday.
And these tunnels were on the same scale as we've seen in Gaza, aren't they? These are
vastly more. No, vastly more. I was inside one about 4 weeks ago. I was 50 metres underneath Lebanon. They were incredible. They were dug into solid chalk, 900 metres long, the one that I went to. Fully electric. It had lights, it had aircon, it had fire suppression systems, and it also had an insane amount of ammunition. And the idea was Hezbollah fighters would go there from all over the country in civilian clothing, get changed into their uniforms, pick up their weapons, and launch downhill 500 to 900 metres into Israel and start doing what Hamas did on the 7th of October. So far, far more difficult to destroy and far, far more difficult to build, which is why when they're destroyed, it's a great thing for Israel because it's not a capability Hezbollah can get back anytime soon.
OK. So, I mean, and Hezbollah would have been happy to sign this deal because they have been pretty much obliterated. The leader after leader after leader assassinated. A huge number of their higher echelons of their commanders killed or severely injured in those magnificently brilliant exploding pager attacks, and then the radios after that. Were they willing to come to the table?
We're led to believe so. And, we're in hot take space here because we haven't seen the firm details of the agreement. Yeah. But Hezbollah have certainly had an absolute battering for 3 months, and it's going to take them a very long time to recover from this. Now, will they try to? Of course they will, and Iran will want them to recover as well. Iran are probably hugely in favour of the ceasefire as well. Hezbollah with a jewel in the crown of their proxy strategy, and the last thing they want is to see them degraded beyond any future use. So the task for the Israelis now is going to be stopping resupply from Syria, stopping resupply through Beirut by sea, and trying to prevent Hezbollah getting back to where they were before this war.
Yeah, I mean, this thing, Israel, battling on all fronts, of course, not having to be fighting that war in southern Lebanon frees up more resources for dealing with events in Gaza. What chance does this mean that there may be a greater chance for ceasefire in Gaza with Hamas, or is that a completely different kettle of fish?
No, I'm quite positive about this, and I don't think you can look at any one front in this war in isolation from the other 6 or 7. I think you have to always consider the second-order effects of what actions in one front means in another. And what this means for Gaza is that Hamas are now very, very isolated. The Qataris have kicked out their leadership to Turkey. Their allies in Hezbollah have stopped firing. Iran seemed deterred from the last Israeli missile attack. And their mission to try and hammer Israel on all these different fronts is now looking as if it's been a failure. And so it all depends now on whether Hamas decide to keep trying to degrade Israel internationally by sacrificing Gazans to the maximum extent for the next few months, or whether actually they look at this now and say, look, we've been beaten as well.
I mean, has Donald Trump's election been a game changer in this? Because he's been so clear that there's one side in this war that he supports and only one, and it's Israel. His pick for Secretary of State Marco Rubio has made that very clear and is fully behind the efforts of the Israelis to completely and utterly destroy Hamas and pummel them into the ground. And says that it's very clear every single Palestinian death in Gaza is absolutely to be held. That is the Hamas's fault, not Israel's. Does the arrival of Donald Trump in the White House, does that just mean that, frankly, the game has changed?
I mean, potentially, but I'm slightly sceptical, particularly when it comes to the Lebanon deal. I think that's mainly because the IDF have had a massive and stunning victory in the sense that they've achieved all of their war aims. Yeah. They've hammered the leadership, they've nailed the rockets, and they've destroyed all the infrastructure in the south. They reached the Litani River yesterday. So when it comes to Trump, I think he might have an impact on Gaza, especially when Hamas see that there's no chance of any pressure on the White House whatsoever whilst Mr. Trump and his allies are,
yeah, absolutely.
In the presidency.
It's going to be fascinating to watch over the next few months, see what happens. Andrew Fox, always good to see you. He's from the Henry Jackson Society. Thank you for that. Benedict Spencer, I know you keep a very close breast on Middle East affairs. Do you think there's any hope of a ceasefire in Gaza?
I think it's going to be a lot harder to achieve simply because they're a lot more intransigent in Hamas.
I mean, their entire maison d'etre is to destroy Israel and kill every Jew.
This was always existential for them. They were gambling on other people being drawn in and backing them. And to be honest, as much as Hezbollah did sort of fire a lot of rockets at Israel and cause a lot of damage, it never, I think, wanted this war. Certainly not on the terms that it was dragged into it. So no, I don't think that there is going to be a ceasefire. And I also suspect a lot of people in the international community who are sort of sotto voce behind the scenes have said to Israel, get this done so that we don't have to deal with this again before we then go into rebuild it.
It is absolutely fascinating how many of them, Arab leaders actually behind the scenes are very much behind what Israel is doing indeed. Thank you very much for that. More from Benedict Spence, lots more top guests coming throughout the show. This is a talk. We are, of course, the home of common sense.
on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Lots more to talk about. Benedict Spencer's still with me, Conservative commentator. He's going to join me for all the chat. Lots more top guests, as well as Benedict. I don't want him to get the wrong idea there. And his moustache. We'll be interviewing him later on, I don't know, the Middle East, who knows what. We'll get him on assisted dying. Should we get your tash on assisted dying?
Is that what this says?
Or have I assumed it's gender?
You have, absolutely. I think it's very much a... Actually, is it a they?
It's a they. It's a they, them.
It's
It's
an it.
a they, them, them, dash. I don't know why I just did that. Anyway, whether you are listening on DAB Plus Radio or on your smart speaker or watching on YouTube or on your connected device, it's great to have your company. Coming up in the next hour, the 60-day ceasefire in Lebanon has begun after Israel and Hezbollah agreed to that US-backed peace deal that sees both sides withdraw from southern Lebanon. Plus, the assisted dying bill. We'll be talking more about that. That vote's coming up on Friday, but it could be scrapped even before the official vote on Friday, after a group of crossbench MPs or cross-party MPs tabled a wrecking amendment to stop it. We'll talk about that as well. And the three former Conservative Prime Ministers, that's Johnson, May and Truss, who were all opposed to the assisted dying bill and have spoken out today. And at Labour's net zero plans, one of my favourite stories of the week, they're in chaos after electric car sales targets and massive fines on car manufacturers were blamed for the closure of the Vauxhall factory in Luton, costing 1,100 jobs. Well, let's talk about that first up in the show. Into today's hour, Benedict, because we were just talking about it earlier. It is just extraordinary, really is, that you've got these net zero targets, and again, we've got the 2051 for net zero. So the madness of that, of course, won't make any difference to climate change. I don't think man will make any difference to climate change anyway. Certainly won't make a difference to the 1% of emissions that Britain gives out, but also we'll only manage to do it if we did do it, which we won't, by simply importing everything that's being made from abroad. So in a coal-fired power station, basically creating the energy in China for them to make the things which we'll then import. But, don't worry, our carbon output's really low. It's a load of abject nonsense. Then they came up with the madness on the cars. And it was 2035, then 2035, it moves 30. It moves depending on the way the wind blows or doesn't blow, because it rarely does blow enough in this country for the wind tire burns to provide our electricity. But we've got these targets on clean energy, clean electricity, completely fossil fuel free by 2030. Totally unachievable, unaffordable, never going to happen. Never, seriously, it's never going to happen. And these targets on cars. The targets on the cars are fascinating. They want us to buy electric vehicles. Yeah. And the way they're going to make us buy electric vehicles is not by electric vehicles becoming, mass market and being sold cheaply and everyone going, these are brilliant. Not by them putting in the electric charging points everywhere so people can charge them quickly. Not by making the charging that much quicker. That it's just not an issue that they take a little bit longer than filling up with petrol or diesel. No, by basically banning manufacturers from selling us non-electric vehicles. So as of this year and onwards, we are looking at if you're a manufacturer of cars and you're selling cars in this country, you can sell a minimum of 20% of your cars have to be electric vehicles, and every single car that is diesel or petrol or hybrid that you sell over that. More than the 80%, you get fined. And the fines are extraordinary. They're not like a couple hundred quid. They are £15,000 per vehicle. Manufacturers have gone, well, great, we'll try and sell these cars. They can't sell them. The motorists don't want to buy them. And when motorists don't want to buy them, they're in a situation where they're taking such a big hit selling other cars, they're basically saying, we're just simply not going to bother anymore. We either won't sell here, or in the case of Vauxhall, saying, we won't manufacture here. We're going to close down our factory in Luton. Benedict, this was always going to happen. The government has said they're going to water down some of the fines. They're going to try and keep the targets, but change the fines. This is insane. It is, and it is destroying what's left of our automotive industry. And the problem is, if you're then setting yourself up against countries like China that can build electric vehicles or any kind of vehicle with massive state support and has huge markets anyway, and coal-fired energy, which is able to make its own steel and things like that. That's a great disadvantage. And then, of course, on the other side, you have the United States, where rather than try and regulate everything to death, they go, let's make it even better. Let's try and deregulate. And also, let's let's frack, let's drill for gas, let's drill for oil, and become the world's biggest energy supplier.
It's a really desperate state of affairs. The United States is effectively a European country, but it is the polar opposite in terms of the philosophical outlook. It's as if everybody who left went, right, well, we're going to try this idea somewhere else, and that's exactly what they did, and look, lo and behold, it's the superpower.
Well,
and everybody still in Europe is going, oh, well, maybe it'll change.
Yeah, they talk a good game. I mean, Joe Biden, the Democrats, talked a great game on net zero, and there's a load of absolute abject nonsense about it goes on. And there are, the same sort of pushes for electric vehicles. Well,
of course, lefties get in everywhere.
But fundamentally, they've also been making sure they've got enough energy.
Yes, and the fact that this is perhaps the most brutal thing, and always is the most brutal thing, is that it's pretty widely accepted in energy circles that the UK could have some of the lowest electricity prices in the world. It could be entirely energy self-sufficient and a net exporter if it wanted to. But it doesn't want to, or at least its government doesn't want it to. But I dare say, actually, rather too many members of the public still look at things like fracking and go, oh, no, it'll cause my house to collapse.
They saw a documentary that was on YouTube 20 years ago.
They listened to
saying, oh, yeah, you had fire coming out of the water pumps. I mean, genuinely all made-up nonsense.
There is no example of a society anywhere in history that had rising energy prices getting more progressive or building more or moving forward. But that's us. We have the most expensive electricity price. But it's right there. It's right there. The coal, the oil, or the gas. We could just pick the gas. We wouldn't have to bother with the coal.
Gas is very clean. Frack gas is very clean.
We wouldn't have to bother with North Sea oil or coal. You could just frack and we'd be almost entirely energy independent, almost like that. But we choose not to. And on top of that, you could use that to then fund the transition to nuclear, which France has done and now generates huge amounts of even cleaner energy. But we're not going to do that either, because why would you make things easy for yourself in the UK? That's not how we roll.
Well, no, exactly, because there is a self-flagellating aspect to this religion, this eco-zealotry, that they rather like, although they constantly say we're going to get richer, we're going to create 500,000 green jobs, land of milk and honey, cheaper energy, more reliable energy, more secure energy, everything. All of it is an abject lie. And anyone who can add up, I'm not talking about having it, I've got the same qualification from university as Ed Miliband, by the way. Anyone who can do, I'm talking like maths of an 8-year-old could tell you that this stuff doesn't add up. But I want to hear from you, particularly, do you own an electric vehicle? Have you decided to upgrade your car, but you've not got an electric vehicle? Maybe you've had one. I went, no, thank you very much. Maybe you'd love to have one, but actually you've got nowhere to charge it. And of course, the cost of charging your vehicle is an absolute fortune on the street. Although bizarrely, people are charged less at home, which I find extraordinary. But don't worry about someone trying to heat their home with electricity, actually needing that. But the government is expected to say water down their strict net zero rules for sales of electric cars. I think they're going to announce, Jonathan Reynolds, the business secretary, something along the lines of like some sort of the fines. You're not going to have to pay the fines this year. You can trade them off against fines in the future.
If you plant a tree, we'll let you defer it for a year.
It'll be like, the sort of medieval sort of, selling of your sins.
It's strange that we've got this left-wing government that does seem to be going down a left-wing, a medieval route, because its solution to farming is, well, we're just going to crush all the small farmers and let major conglomerate feudal lords.
Absolutely, it's quite extraordinary. But I want to know, manufacturers say, look, we can't sell the sodding things, so you're fining us for selling cars that people want to buy when people don't want to buy the ones you're telling us they should buy. I want to know your reaction to all of this, because my view is I've been telling you this for years. Told you so. Net zero simply does not survive. It's any interaction with reality. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. You can text TALK to 87222. Get in touch on X at Talk TV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1, standard network rate message. I also want to hear from you about the BBC nominating various people for Women's Footballer of the Year. Now, you might have thought they'd only nominate women, but no. In their infinite wisdom, they decided to nominate as one of those up for a public vote, who then subsequently won that public vote, Barbara Banda, who did score a hat-trick at the Olympics in Paris and has become the second highest scorer in the US National Women's Soccer League this season. Barbara won from a 5-player shortlist against a player who won the female Ballon d'Or, that's Atana Bonmati. But extraordinarily, this player, Barbara Banda, is not a woman. Now, Barbara Banda was assigned female at birth, but actually he has this thing called DSD, differences in sex development, when has, in 2022, got banned from the Africa Cup of Nations tournament. Why? Because he failed sex tests. He failed testosterone tests. He had the testosterone of a man because he was born a man and was incorrectly identified as female at birth. He's also been banned from transfer to Real Madrid after failing sex tests in that country as well. It's very, very simple. He is a man who has been living as a woman. I don't blame him. It's not his fault. Doctors made a mistake at the start. I'm sure this is all very sad and must be very difficult. But nevertheless, he's a man. And you only have to look at him, if we could put a picture up on the screen, you only have to look at him to know, for those watching on YouTube, that he is a man. He has a male physique in every single way. And then we saw, there's a video of him getting this award and all these female players, and they're clapping and smiling. Now, maybe it's because they're on camera. Maybe he's just a really nice guy. Maybe he's very lovely. Maybe, you know, he's fine. I'm not having a go at him. It's a simple matter of fact that one of the reasons he is a successful player is because he's a man.
Yeah. We're pretty good at football.
He shouldn't be nominated. He shouldn't be playing in women's leagues, and he shouldn't be winning awards for women players. As J.K. Rowling said, very, very, very clearly, you know, clearly the BBC, presumably the BBC decided this was more time efficient than going door to door to spit directly in women's faces. I couldn't agree with you more, J.K.
That's a very time-consuming thing to do. I say congratulations, perhaps. Show those ladies who's boss. You know, it really is about time, actually, that
He's
men...
feeling very brave because I'm wired in and I can't reach him
reach
across
me.
the studio.
Well, maybe if you're a man, you'd be able to reach me a little further. Your reach would be longer.
Don't worry, there's a break coming. I'll reach him. When he doesn't appear in the next section, you know he's on the floor. You know that's where he is.
Yeah, but I'm a man, so I'm also faster than you. Oh, how unfortunate. No, obviously it's ridiculous.
Shall we see?
Should we try?
Should we leave the cameras on and we'll see?
We should film this. This would be quite funny.
That would be award-winning.
This would be, see, that's a sporting contest people would want to see, is how long I can survive.
Put your money on Benedict or me. Come on, guys.
The moustache, the wind resistance, it gives you a fighting chance, Julia. Just this one. No, it's ridiculous that we're even talking about this,
it
obviously.
Is.
But I agree with you, the fact that they're all sort of clapping there. But as I said earlier, it's because they have to play against Babs, and Babs might decide to go in two-footed or leave a crafty elbow in.
We saw this with Leah Thomas, when Leah Thomas, a 6 foot plus huge male, all intact. We know he's all intact. He used to swing his todger around naked when he was in the women's changing rooms, when he was competing in women's college swimming. And this was a guy who'd have been, what was he, 400th or something in male swimming. Yeah. But oh no, decided suddenly, turns out I'm a woman. Turns out I'm no longer a bloke, I'm a woman.
To be fair, 400th in the world is still not bad. He's still a hefty specimen of a man.
But you're not making any money, you're not winning any awards then. So then he goes into women. And the women were all basically told, if you speak out, you're out. You'll lose your scholarship at college. You lose your sporting future. You'll be labelled a bigot. And so they smiled and they carried on and they stood on podiums next to him as he won again and again and again. And they just had to do this. Lionesses. My call to the Lionesses, you are amazing, wonderful, inspirational women. I am so pleased that young women today have you to look up to and not these silly pouting influencers with their fake eyelashes. They've got women who are fantastic physically, fantastic role models who they can look up to. Why don't you stand up for women? Why don't you, as a team, all together, stand up? This isn't transphobic. It's not a man identified as trans pretending to be a woman. This is someone who is the victim of a terrible biological mix-up, but who is nevertheless, Barbara Banda is a male player. He has no business playing in women's football. He is taking the place of a woman who could be achieving in sport. He is also taking the place of a woman who should have won the award for the BBC Women's Footballer of the Year. Why are you staying silent? You are the Lionesses. Why don't you use the podium you're on, or the platform you've got? Why don't you use your voices? Or why don't you roar loudly for girls and women in sport, for a fair playing field in sport? The reason we have women's football, the reason we have women's sport is because male have an inbuilt physical advantage, as does this player. Come on, Lionesses, speak out, support other women, support other girls who want to support your sport. This is your time, because otherwise you're just saying it's okay for women's sport to be destroyed by pretty much anyone with high testosterone who fails a sex test or puts on a wig and says they're a woman to take over women's sport. And if you allow that, in about a decade's time, there won't be any women in women's sport anymore. Come on, Lionesses, do the right thing. Use your roar, use your voice and speak out. We'll see if that works. I have a funny feeling it won't. And it is sad, Benedict, that it won't work.
Yeah, and what will inevitably happen, actually, is what happens in real life when lionesses become a little bit too troublesome, is men will shoot them down, both you know, literally and physically. That's what we're at here, basically. This is a form of misogyny, basically.
It
where
is.
Women are being told you have to go along with this because you're a bigot, if not, and they're being told by men.
Be quiet.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I love J.K. Rowling. She absolutely refused to do that. The Supreme Court today, on the second day of a case deciding what a woman is in law. Again, what on earth? What on earth is happening when our courts are using up their time on this nonsense?
Oh, honestly, well, for a start, I mean, the entire edifice of the British Supreme Court, the fact that we have that and then it's sort of adjudicating on these matters, it's just farcical. And yeah, anybody can tell you, actually, in reality, what a woman is, what a man is. The fact that you then have these very learned friends, very clever people all going into the intricacies and spending time on this, when, in fact, the conversation will be done in 5 seconds in most pubs, which Keir Starmer himself is the best sort of public forum, which is probably why he's so in favour of them closing. You know, that's ultimately where we're at right now, is that the very intelligent people in the ivory towers will tell you what is and what is not and what are the caveats, whereas most people will go, no, we're pretty certain what this is and we don't need you to do this. We all know, don't we? Well, particularly on the BBC and this Women's Football of the Year, I'd love to hear your reaction to that. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000, text 87222, get in touch on X at Talk TV, same as for the net zero and eco cars as well. I just want to squeeze in one more story. Ed Davey. I don't know if we've got the video. Ed Davey, last time you heard, Lib Dem leader, did very well, 70-plus MPs at the last election. He did very well with a lot of sort of rather silly videos and rather silly sort of stunts where he was on a paddle board, he was going down slides at fun fairs. I mean, you name it. But it got him in the news and people were talking about it. It was all over social media. Well, this time, he's issued a TikTok challenge to Keir Starmer. Let's play a little bit.
Bring the boom strong, bring the boom and no fear. Bring the boom was the song in the summer this year.
Put them on the boom meter, we're gonna rate it. Put the fries in the bag now, already ate it.
Boom and doom in the restaurants, making some noise, taking the field.
That's probably enough, isn't it? Now, if you're lucky enough not to be watching that's rather, I can't be honest, rather tubby-looking Ed Davey. I don't mean to be harsh, but it's quite a lot of belly there, and he's got his hands in the air, and basically he's doing a sort of funny little step, a little dance, a TikTok dance. He's trying to do basically one a day. He's challenging Keir Starmer to play FIFA, which I understand the young people are telling me is some sort of game, online game.
Has women in it now.
Has women in it now, apparently. Or maybe men who think they're women, I don't know. But he wants to challenge him to some online game. I don't know what... I mean, we've got like the assisted dying bill, we've got benefits explosion, we've got wars on, and this is what the Lib Dem leader is doing.
To be honest, I don't think that what he's doing is any more ludicrous or any less ludicrous than what's currently going on with the debate around assisted dying in this country. That's basically the standard of government that we have now. I remember when I was at university, you used to play FIFA. If you beat somebody by 5 goals or more, they had to write you a public apology. It was a form of shaming people. You know, and maybe that'll happen if Keir Starmer's particularly bad. But, I mean, it's not really very dignified. It's a stunt. It's not going to go anywhere. Keir Starmer is not going to play FIFA. Keir Starmer has no personal
He's too busy
life.
Getting planes places.
He gets planes places and then he just sort of sits there staring at the seat in front. He has no inner life, it turns out. Doesn't have a favourite Christmas film. Doesn't have
what's
favourite
that about?
I mean, probably because he didn't want to say The Grinch, because everybody would, the jokes would write themselves, or The Nightmare Before Christmas. There are many pitfalls there. But no, all that we've discovered so far is that Keir Starmer supports the Arsenal.
He's an empty vessel, isn't he?
He probably has nothing to say about the Arsenal.
He's weirdly, although much cleverer, obviously, than Kamala Harris, who's clearly quite stupid. We played that video of her earlier, let's face it, after a box of wine.
Yeah.
But he clearly, there's nothing behind the eyes, is there?
Yeah, and I say we, the country elected that person, because we've had far too much of people with ideas.
Well done, everyone. Anyway, 11:20 is the time. We're going to take a break. We're going to hear from you. Want to hear your thoughts on EVs and on Barbara, who's not what most people would think of as a Barbara, but who has won Women's Footballer of the Year. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
Yeah, the car industry is facing a crunch which was utterly foreseeable a year ago when this zero-emission vehicle mandate came into being, requiring 22% of cars sold this year to be pure electric, or otherwise manufacturers face a £15,000 fine for each vehicle over the limit.
Yeah.
Well, up until the end of October, only 18% of cars sold were pure electric, and that's been the situation for about 3 years now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. It's coming up to 11:25. Let's get your messages coming in about EVs, and there's basically a plan we expect today to water down these strict net zero rules and fines over the sales of non-electric cars, as manufacturers are saying. Basically, we're going to stop manufacturing these things. We're certainly going to leave Britain. We'll get to your messages and your calls on that. Also getting some messages on this Women's Footballer of the Year who's not a woman. But your reaction to this, Lily says they wasted how many billions on charging stations and only built 8. Plus, people have been complaining about EV cars not working in extreme temperatures and the fact they've caused several house fires. Yeah, this is a good point. Mark says definitely a lack of demand. Even the fanboys should be able to see that if their ego will allow them to. And Dee Dee says they need to scrap net zero altogether, not just water it down, because we all know it's a scam. Hear to that, Dee Dee. Dave says, I had no idea. We now live in a dictatorship with the government telling one of our most important industries what they can and can't sell. Market forces being strangled by nanny and Vauxhall workers on the dole. Stuart says this was always going to happen. This isn't even hindsight. We've been saying this will happen, as we have, since they first came up with the plan. Both the Tories and Labour have been forcing this nonsense net zero targets onto the country. We don't want EVs. We don't want heat pumps either. Hear to that as well. Well, Jason is on the line. He's called up on 0344 499 1000. And Jason says I'm wrong. Good morning to you, Jason.
Good morning, Julia. Once again, I'm speaking to you about something controversial, allegedly.
Well, again, alleged. I don't think it's anything controversial. I think these plans are mad. What do you want to say? What am I wrong about?
Quite a few things. There's a lot of myths. Like you just said ago...
It's like being at home with my marriage. No, carry on. Sorry.
House fires. The problem we have at the moment, statistical data to do with electric vehicles, they're including e-scooters, bikes, all of those are put into the same bracket of statistics, and unfortunately EV cars come into that bracket. So actually cars catching fire at home doesn't happen. I've read the data.
We have seen. I wasn't making. That's not my argument against cars.
No, I know.
Cars. So but we have seen car fires, and they're very difficult to put out because they're battery fires.
100%. They're more like a firework than a combustion engine that catches fire. 100% agree with that. As an engineer, I understand that. And as being ex-Navy and having to fight fires, I understand that. However, charging. Julia, you're going about charging. I charge at home with my EV, and I can tell you now it's cost me £117.61 for the year. For the whole year, November to November. However, you are spot on with regards to charging away from home. I've been to see my son in Sheffield. It cost me £52 for the trip. I left my house at 100%. I got to Derby. I didn't need to charge because I could have done the whole journey from Swansea all the way up to Sheffield on one charge. But I'm 53. I needed the loo. So
you may as well charge while I'm there. Yeah.
Exactly. Stopped, plugged it in. My wife said, let's have a coffee and a muffin. I literally sat down with my coffee and I had to fill my app. Car's now complete. It was charged by the time I'd used the toilet and got a coffee. So charging speed, I can charge in about 22 minutes. And I've got a cheap EV. There's EVs out there, expensive ones, and the executive for over 40 grand that can charge in about 8 minutes.
Yeah. Okay. Now, here's the thing. But again, 8 minutes, 22 minutes, not the same as pulling up, putting the petrol, the diesel in and leaving. So there is still that aspect.
We shouldn't be driving long distances without stopping and taking a break anyway. We see too many accidents where people tired at the wheel because they're trying to do a 300-mile journey because they got a car that can do it in a oneer. And you really shouldn't. You should be stopping every hour and a half to 2 hours anyway, just to take a break, stop the eye strain, stop the concentration. We're operating a motor vehicle, for God's sake.
Okay, well, okay. I think that's still, I mean, unless that's illegal, it's still up to people to do. But here's the thing. If they're so great, why don't people want to buy them? There are discounts to buy them. The manufacturers are really desperately trying to sell them. Why aren't they buying them?
Because of shows like this that give a lot of misinformation.
It's my fault. It's my fault.
No. It's you, Mike.
I'm not even allowed to say over what car I own, let alone what a car anyone else buys.
No, the car market generally is stagnant at the moment, and EVs are 100% stagnant. But car market is because, as you know, we're in a cost of living crisis. Our energy prices are going up. Everything is going up. We've got an idiot government that are just crucifying it. My son's just been laid off as one of the few because the national national insurance contribution. It was one of the last in. They've had to sack 20 people. They've had to. So he's just lost his job. But the point is, it's more to do with.
You think it's the economy generally? Here's the thing. If it was the economy generally, then they would be selling fewer cars of all kinds, but manufacturers wouldn't be saying, we're getting a 15 grand fine every time we sell a car that isn't an EV, and we can't shift these cars. Basically, the only electric cars they're shifting in any big numbers are to the fleets for companies. And people don't want to buy a second-hand EV, largely because of the cost of the battery to replace, and the battery is the most expensive part of the car.
We talk about batteries. Do you have a mobile phone?
I do have a mobile phone.
It has a lithium FFP battery in it. In 5 years, your mobile phone will not have a lithium battery in it. It's going to be more like the sodium-based one, which don't overheat. There's zero degradation. KATL and BYD battery firms are near enough there with
that'd
the
be
technology.
Great. That'd be fantastic. And no one is going to fine me or fine the manufacturer for me choosing to buy that kind or this kind, because I'll make that choice if they're better. And everyone I know goes, oh, this is so much better. My phone's not overheating and it lasts longer. I'll go, oh, brilliant. But the government's not going to have to get involved telling people not to sell the better kind.
Yeah, but the government, come on, we all know what the government, it's about revenue. And at the end of the day, the EV market, whether we like it or not, is taking money away from the government because of fuel duty. I don't fuel my car. I fuel my car in my house. So they've lost, on average, about £50 a week I was putting in my
Which is why they want to move to pay per mile, because they want to get the money. And I've said that for 10 years as well. As soon as they're not getting fuel duty, if we move to EVs, everyone goes, they're cheaper to run. They won't be cheaper to run when everyone's got one, because they'll find their way of taxing it.
Of course, a prime example, we were on road tax and we went to emissions tax. Oh, good. EVs don't pay any tax now because zero emissions.
But you will.
They've now made it back to road tax for next year. For the next year, I've got to pay £10 a year. After it's going to be £165. Again, they want to drive everybody, the population, to EVs. They're doing the wrong thing about it because they're making it a punishment.
You don't need to drive people to a better product. People will just buy them anyway.
Oh, they won't.
They will. People will always buy a better product. That's how capitalism works. That's how we have innovation. That's how we have competition. That's how we get better stuff. People will buy a better washing machine because it's cheaper, or it's quicker, or it's faster, or it looks nicer. People will buy better stuff. You don't need to force people to do it. And when people are being forced to do it, manufacturers are being fined if they sell the wrong kind, that sends a signal to everyone, oh, they're not better. We're having to be forced to buy them, and people then don't want to buy them. They stick to their diesels and petrols, which is what I'm doing.
This fining is a joke, but it doesn't surprise me with the government whatsoever. The government is, like you said, turning into a dictatorship rather than...
It's been like that for a long time.
It is. We shouldn't be fining it. I should have freedom of choice. If I want to buy a petrol car, I'll buy a petrol. If I want to buy an EV, I'll buy an EV key.
See,
and the poor old salesman shouldn't have a choice.
We're going to end on a note of agreement, Jason. Fabulous call. Really appreciate that. Thank you very much indeed. I want to take a couple of messages also about the BBC naming Barbara Banda, a player who has failed sex eligibility rules because he was actually born a man, although wrongly identified as a woman, as their Women's Footballer of the Year. Your reaction to that? Stephen says it's a disgrace to women's sport and a disrespect to real women. Neil says good on her. If she had high testosterone levels. She didn't fail sex eligibility rules. Facts are important. Well, yeah, because there's a level of testosterone you have that mean you can't possibly be a woman, because it's not possible to have those levels of testosterone, because you're a man. Catherine says they continue to troll women. Banda is a man. They know it. It's despicable. Mendy says, that's the BBC being woke. It should just be defunded and let it survive on subscriptions. Andrew is on the line in Hertfordshire. He's called up on 0344 499 1000. We'll have his say. Andrew, what do you make of Barbara Banda winning Women's Footballer of the Year? Hello, Andrew. Hello, where are you? What do you make of this then?
Hello, you there? Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, where's BBC Verify when you need them? They're not there, are they?
So true. So true.
You know, this is straightforward. You know, in all things in the world, women lose out. It doesn't matter whether it's war, when we use rape as a tool, when you've seen what's gone on in Ukraine and by Hamas. And if you look at this situation, the BBC is undermining the reality of life.
Yeah.
Male and female. That's the end of it. And to give this award is that clever lefty thing trying to undermine the order. And it is really wrong. Look at the wonderful women sportsmen that are out there.
Women sportsmen. I love that.
Yeah, women's sport. But look at them; they're unbelievable. You know, Laura Davis. You look a long way back, and you look at the wonderful shot putter in the Olympics from Northern Ireland. These were iconic individuals who were who they were. Sally Gunnell. We're not celebrating them anymore. We're taking a bloke and letting them compete against a female.
As you say, where's BBC Verify when you need them? Andrew, thank you so much for your call. I have to leave it there. Thank you so much. 11:35 is the time. Going to take a quick break. Then we're going to be talking about the assisted dying bill with one of the co-signatories of that bill. That's Christine Jardine, the Liberal Democrat. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning to you. This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Benedict Spence also here. Delighted to be joined right now by Liberal Democrat MP Christine Jardine. Good morning to you, Christine.
Good morning, Julia.
Thank you so much for joining us. I want to talk about the bill on assisted dying that comes to Parliament. 5 hours debate, then a vote on Friday. It's a private member's bill. You're a co-signatory of Kem Leadbeater's bill. Why do you believe that this is the right way and the right time to bring in assisted dying?
Well, the first thing is that it's a free vote. We've had a Common Select Committee report. It spent 14 months on an inquiry, and we've had various debates. And now Kim has brought this forward as a private member's bill because it is an issue of conscience. It's up to every individual MP. It's nothing to do with party politics to make the decision on the basis of the public in their constituency, their own views, and the views that we've heard. And I think it's the right time because it's 10 years since Parliament last debated it fully with legislation like this. And we know from various surveys that have been done over those 10 years that the British public is in favour of a very narrow definition of a terminal illness with safeguards built in that would give people choice. And for me, that's the big thing. I don't know what I would want to do, Julia, but I don't feel I have the right to deny other people the choice.
And this is the thing, actually. The public has been way ahead of MPs on this, and I thought the same in 2015. I'm instinctively very much in favour of this right being extended to people, but I'm in the strange position of thinking, well, I think this bill goes too far. It doesn't have quite enough safeguards, but at the same time doesn't go far enough. I would like it to include not just people with just 6 months to live, people with a year to live, but also people who are not necessarily going to die anytime soon or at all of their particular predicament, whether a disability or disease, an injury. But if they feel their life is unbearable, they are in pain, I think that anybody should have the right to end their life, but with the proper safeguards. What do you make of the... I mean, I know why Kem Leadbeater wanted it to be just specifically about assisted dying. It's not going down the route of a lot of countries like, certainly like, the Netherlands and Belgium. We've got far wider range. But what do you make of the claims of the critics? And we've seen many, many critics come out. We've had Boris Johnson, Theresa May and Liz Truss, 3 former prime ministers now speaking out against the bill, and many others who are simply saying, look, they can understand the urge for this, they understand it, but they feel that this is a slippery slope. And where are the safeguards? That in so many parts of the world and in American states, there has been a slippery slope, and who's eligible has massively expanded. And I know Oregon has been where this has been based on. Why do you feel that this law, if it were brought in this country, wouldn't see that slippery slope happening?
Well, you actually, the answer to that was in your own question. You talked about where it's very wide in Netherlands and Belgium because they went for a definition based on unbearable suffering, and that's very subjective. What is unbearable suffering to you might be different to me. It's very subjective, and then it does get widened, and disabled people are unhappy. Disabled organisations are unhappy that sort of definition would allow an expansion, and you would go down the route of Belgium or the Netherlands. The reason that it's based on what's happened in Oregon and other places like Australia, New Zealand, Spain, who've introduced assisted dying since the last time we debated it 10 years ago, is that that's a very, very tight definition of terminal illness, of someone who has a diagnosis and they are going to die. That sounds very harsh. And believe me, talking to people who are in that situation, it's incredibly difficult, but it gives them the choice. And it's limited to those people, and they have to have a 6-month diagnosis, told that they probably only have 6 months to live, 2 doctors, there has to be a High Court judge, and we also have to have the safeguards protect them from any suggestion of coercion.
How do we do that, though? That's the difficulty. And there's also talk about people being pressured. I think it's perfectly valid for someone to say, I don't want to be a burden on my family. I think it's perfectly reasonable for people to say, I don't. If I've been given a dementia diagnosis and I'm going to basically spend, 5 years possibly in a care home, not knowing who I am, distressing my family. Yeah, do you know what? I think it's perfectly reasonable for me to say, I don't want that. But I mean, I know that wouldn't be allowed under this bill. I think to a certain extent it should be with sufficient safeguards. But who's to know what is coercion and what is persuasion and what is someone making a decision off their own back?
Well, you said yourself, if someone says, I don't want I believe one of the high-profile campaigners, Esther Ranson, has said that she doesn't want her family's last memory of her to be of her in pain. And I listened to a woman who came to see us in Parliament talking about her brother's death and how traumatic it was. I'm not going to go into it here, but it was incredibly unpleasant and how traumatic that was for his family. But that's your choice. Coercion is where someone else is forcing you to do it. Now, doctors are increasingly trained to do that. And one of the safeguards in the bill is that if a GP is in any doubt whatsoever, or a doctor's in any doubt, they can get another medical practitioner. They can get a psychiatrist, psychologist, someone else who can come in who has expertise in recognising if someone is showing behaviour which would suggest that they're being coerced into this, who would be able to talk to them. So the safeguards are there because I do think that is important. And I think, but again, it comes back to terminal illness. That has to be the basis of it, and choice. And I just don't think that I have the right to deny something. I've like many people, I've watched relatives die in horrible, people that I love in difficult circumstances, horrible circumstances. And once I was myself in the situation where I had to wait to find out how serious a growth which had been removed was. And I'd had all the warnings from the doctors. And looking back now, I don't know what decision I would have made if the news they gave me was different. But I would have liked to have had the choice. Yes. And I think other people deserve the choice. Yeah,
I do agree with you on that. There's something that I've always felt as well, and it's quite interesting actually how many people who've watched loved ones die who actually, that has been a change for them. Now, there's some talk about this bill being scrapped even before it's voted on. There's a group of cross-party MPs who have basically scheduled, they've co-sponsored what they called a fatal reasoned amendment, and basically it's a bill which would effectively, if it's chosen, they vote on it during the second reading, but it'll come before a vote on the actual bill takes place. And if it does take place and it gets past this amendment vote, basically it's this House declines to give a second reading to the terminally ill adults end-of-life bill because the House's procedures for the consideration of private members' bills do not allow for sufficient debate on and scrutiny of a bill on a matter of this importance. They're basically saying, we've only had a couple of weeks, it's only 5 hours of debate. It's not enough time. We haven't had all of the sort of the preparations and analysis of how this would work, all the preparations that a government bill would be able to bring. This isn't the time or place to do this. That's a fair argument, isn't it?
Not really. Not when you take into account the situation at the moment and what we've been through already in Parliament. We had, a select committee inquiry which consulted with all the groups. They talked to all the MPs. We all submitted evidence. There was consultation. Also, it is absolutely normal for something like this to be a private member's bill. When it's come before Parliament before, it has been a private member's bill.
And I think abortion as well, again, moral arguments. Yeah.
And what happens on Friday is the start, in some ways, of the parliamentary debate, because we've had various Westminster Hall debates in the Chamber over the past 7 years that I've been here. And now we have the second reading of a bill. We actually have a proposition to consider. 5 hours on Friday, but then that's just the start.
And then it goes through all the other readings.
Committees, report, third reading, go through the
we shall see what's going to happen. Now, I know that, your party leader, by the way, he is he's tackled some very difficult issues. He's very good on issues like social care. I know he's personally had to deal with that in his own family with a disabled child, and he's been a valiant fighter on that front. What on earth is going on with him with this video, though? Let's play a video of the latest TikTok challenge that has been issued by your boss.
Bring the boom song, bring the boom and no fear. Bring the boom was the song in the summer this year.
Put them on the boom meter, we're gonna rate it. Put the fries in the bag now, already ate it.
Boom and doom in the restaurants, making some noise, taking the field.
Yeah, for those of you who have the misfortune of watching on YouTube, you've just seen a video outside Parliament of Ed Davey, the Lib Dem leader, doing some rather strange dance and some words coming up on screen in which he's challenging Keir Starmer to a 1v1 FIFA match. Basically, that's an online game, and basically says he wants to do it for charity. It's a number of videos he's done. What on earth is going on? This isn't serious politics, is it, Christine?
I think he genuinely is trying. He's raising money for charity, and the way to attract attention to it, something you want to do for charity is to make it fun and something that people understand. Lots of people play FIFA, and he's challenging Keir Starmer. Now, having seen Ed dance lots of times,
yes.
I would plead with Keir Starmer, please play the game. Please don't let us have to watch him dancing on TikTok, please.
Christine, thank you very much indeed. Christine Jardine, thank you so much for joining us. Benedict Spence, not on that, on the assisted
Just
dying.
on that, I don't know why on earth Keir Starmer should be able to give in to terrorist demands, is what I would say.
Well, exactly.
Flies in the face of government policy.
Well, where are you on the assisted dying bill?
You know where I am. I'm very much opposed to it. I don't think that it in any way covers the safeguards, and I think it's very haphazard the way that people just sort of go, oh, of course it does. But, I mean, the thing that perhaps is, you know, today in the Times, Dominic Grieve has written that actually, no, it really doesn't, and that the ECHR, remember that, will probably say that it's unlawful in its current form. I don't think it's been thought through at all, and perhaps the most egregious thing that I've heard over the last week, and this tells you just how bad a state things are, is that lovely Jess Phillips has decided to talk about something other than herself for once and talk about this, and she says, I'm going to vote for it anyway, even though the NHS isn't able to provide the service. And you just sort of think, right, that's the half-wit state that we're in now. Even though you know the system that will be asked to deal with this cannot do it, you're going to vote for it anyway.
Can I just
That's
say,
catastrophically stupid.
As someone who was actually born in Birmingham, there are going to be calls of complaint.
I don't care.
11:49 is the time. Up next, we are going to talk to the director of Net Zero Watch, Andrew Montford, about what looks like a tiny little scintilla of a victory on net zero over EV cars. Don't miss that. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
Yeah, the car industry is facing a crunch which was utterly foreseeable a year ago when this zero-emission vehicle mandate came into being, requiring 22% of cars sold this year to be pure electric, or otherwise manufacturers face a £15,000 fine for each vehicle over the limit.
Yeah.
Well, up until the end of October, only 18% of vehicles, cars sold, were pure electric, and that's been the situation for about 3 years now.
DAB+. On your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning to you. This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. 11:53 is the time. Benedict Spence is still with me. Just some breaking news. The former Tory party leader, Lord William Hague, has just been elected as the next Chancellor of Oxford University. He was vying with Labour peer Peter Mandelson, Lord Mandelson, who's also in the running. He's also still in the running for the job of being our man in Washington, D.C. But, I mean, basically, these jobs just kind of swap around the great and the good of certain groups, don't they? We know that. We'll talk more about that after 12, no doubt. You can see a picture of Benedict's face right there. Right now, let's turn our attention back to the electric cars. And again, as we've been asking you, loads and loads of calls coming in this. The government expected to water down strict net zero rules for sales of electric cars, involving £15,000 fines for every car that's not electric that's sold over the quota that's now allowed, because apparently we live in eastern Germany now, as manufacturers face a lack of demand from motorists. Let's talk about this with Andrew Montford. He's director of Net Zero Watch. Good morning to you, Andrew.
Good morning, Julia.
Well, I mean, how many times have we discussed this, and how many times has it been rather obvious that, again, these net zero plans, these rules, these pledges, they do not survive basically any sort of dealings whatsoever with reality. People don't want to buy these things.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the whole collision of student politics with the real world, isn't it? You know, they say these things, they wave their hands in the air, they say we're going to do these, you know, this is the target we're going for, and then in the real world, they just don't work. And we've been saying that the motor manufacturing industry is going to be in real trouble. How long have we been saying that for? Years, probably.
But that's it. They've all signed up to this. On BBC had the boss of Ford in the UK on this morning. He was saying, "Oh no, we spent £2 billion, you know, converting our factories to make EV cars. We're fully on board with the whole EV car thing. We just don't want to be fined when we don't sell EV cars."
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the whole industry is in a pickle now because, of course, they have spent loads of money on these new factories and nobody actually wants the EVs. I mean, the sales, I think, are creeping up. But, I mean, most people who get them seem to not like them anyway. So, I think that they're probably going to go down again. So, yeah, I mean, we're in real trouble there. I think we really do want Ed Miliband and to join in the FIFA match with... If they could have a FIFA marathon lasting 5 years, that would be absolutely fantastic, wouldn't it?
Well, keep them busy on that nonsense and stop bothering us. But here's the thing, it's very, very simple. When we had, I mean, people always say, you know, the EV cars are effectively the Betamax of videos, aren't they? Where, you know, there's this battle between different brands, and we see this with mobile phones. You know, people, they didn't have to ban us from using certain, you know, selling certain mobile phones or encourage us with extra money or you have a voucher and the taxpayer will fund you buying a particular mobile phone. People bought the one that they wanted to buy. They were willing to pay extra for certain brands like iPhone because they believed, better. I mean, people make a choice in a capitalist free market economy for the right thing. If electric vehicles are so sodding brilliant and they're so much cheaper and better value to run and they're so easy and so reliable and so good, you wouldn't need to pay people subsidies to buy them, and you wouldn't need to fine manufacturers for selling diesel and petrol cars because people would want to buy them. But why is it people don't want to buy them?
I mean, people don't want to buy them because they're rather inconvenient because, you know, you have a very limited range and if you reach the end of that range, it takes you a long time to refuel, if you like. So, you know, I think what people actually given a free choice would go for would be hybrid cars of some sort, where, you know, you have a petrol engine with the electric motor just, you know, for when you're just doing very short journeys. You know, they work, they give very high fuel efficiency and yeah, That's a step forward.
Yeah. But they're all part of the ban, aren't they? I think a lot of us were very surprised that hybrid motors, we looked at possibly getting a hybrid ahead of these sort of rules on the basis that, well, you know, we're not going to, what are we going to do? Now, oh, sorry, I'm sticking to the diesel. I'm going to buy 3 the day before they're banned. So they're going to have a fantastic resale value. But this is the thing. The manufacturers, they've all basically been conned into, look, you're going to face a ban on selling electric or hybrid vehicles from 2030. Then move to 2035, move back to 2030. I think the Europeans have moved to 2035 now. But it changes all the time. But as soon as you approach the reality of those years actually happening, it falls away. What are we expecting to hear from the Business Secretary, Jonathan Reynolds, today? Because it sounds like he's going to make an announcement, possibly in Parliament, about these rules where manufacturers literally are fined 15 grand every time they sell a diesel or a petrol car that they're not supposed to sell.
Yeah, well, the story that I've read is that they are proposing more support for the industry and a consultation. So I really think we probably want to curb our enthusiasm. This may just be smoke and mirrors. On the other hand, if in a few months' time we get another motor manufacturing company going under or a factory closure, then I think, you know, we're in a whole different ball game, because I don't think Mr. Miliband could survive that, could he? I mean, he is trashing the economy. Yeah. You know, he's a lunatic, and you know.
I mean, we are talking religious zealotry here. I still can't work out whether Keir Starmer's fully signed up to this or not, but at some point, you say, when reality collides with net zero ideology, you know, one of them's going to have to win, and I don't think the voters are going to choose net zero ideology.
No, I think people will be out on the streets. I genuinely do, because the pain is going to be appalling. And you know, I think people can see it coming. I think people are frightened now by what this government are doing. It is quite scary.
Yeah, absolutely. But again, it all carries on from what the Tories were doing. They're on their heads as well. This all happened on their watch as well. It's nice to see us being vindicated once again, as I think we will on all of these issues. Andrew Montford, their director of Net Zero Watch, get more of Benedict's thoughts on all of this. And up next, we're going to be talking to an elite former women's athlete who thinks that a men shouldn't win women's awards. I know, crazy. This is Talk.
smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon to you. This is Talk, the home of common sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Welcome back to the show. Whether you're listening on DAB Plus Radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube and your connected device, great to have your company. Although, frankly, if you are watching, I'd like to apologise for that TikTok video of Davey we keep playing, because I'm really, it's very, very distressing indeed, that dancing. Even his own MP, Christine Jardine, rather unhappy about it. But hey, we might play it again. Plus, a bit more of Kamala Harris after she's been on a box of wine as well in a video that she put out yesterday as well. We're going to play that again just because it just makes us laugh. But there we are. Look at what you could have won. That's the thing. Anyway, coming up in this hour, just a couple of moments, we're going to be talking to a former elite athlete, one of those real women people over the BBC controversy naming a man, because that is what he is, in Barbara Banda, as basically we're BBC Women's Footballer of the Year. Also, saying sex is biological is not transphobic. That's what the Supreme Court heard yesterday in a landmark case being held yesterday and today over whether transgender women can be defined as female. Of course they can't, because they are men. Also, it's PMQs time again, and yes, the usual rules apply. Peter Cardwell is watching it, so you and I don't have to. He'll bring us the highlights, if there are any, a bit later. And more than 2/3 of the British public would support a ban on children using social media before the age of 16, according to a new poll. But an awful lot of teachers apparently don't think banning mobile phones in the classroom will make a difference to teaching. Well, maybe their lessons are just so bad, those teachers, that they probably wouldn't, but there we are. Anyway, this is Talk, the home of common sense. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you also once again to Conservative commentator Benedict Spence, still with us. Talked about so much today. We talked about the EV cars. Lots of calls still coming in on that. Your reaction to the government likely to water down these strict net zero rules. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text Talk and your message to 87222. You can get in touch on X at Talk TV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1, standard network rate message, and also the same numbers to use to talk about this Women's Footballer of the Year, who's not really a woman. Benedict Spence. Both of these stories, I mean, they're kind of, really, they're culture war issues, aren't they? The stuff that we're told that keeps getting stirred up by the right. But someone who has effectively male chromosomes and has far too much testosterone to possibly be a woman, who's misidentified gender at birth, winning a women's sports award and indeed competing in sport against women, that is an issue that is more than just about fighting a culture war and people bandying around silly words. Equally, net zero, culture war issue. Oh, you're a climate denier. Oh, I care about the planet and my grandchildren's future. But you know what? The reality of people buying cars so they can get to and from work, get their kids to and from school, and have a reliable car that's affordable, that's got resale value, and these things are real bread and butter issues for people.
Yeah, this is what happens when you normalise mental illness and you actually listen to what these people have to say as if they're normal people. The clue I would have thought would be the fact that they all have purple hair and they don't wash. But maybe I was just alone in that.
No, but then people in government, last time round and this time round, you actually believe all of this stuff.
Well, do you remember when they invited a child who'd only started speaking about 3 years before and suddenly became a climate campaigning expert, and they all gave her a round of applause?
Greta, every time she spoke, everyone seemed to think that, it was like, God had come down.
Yeah, I mean, she barely spoke Swedish, let alone English, and yet she was the oracle. And, this is why we talk about it being a religious thing, because that's the sort of thing that they used to do way back when. They launched an entire crusade based on what children said back in the day, and this does seem to be a very sort of similar thing. And it's not just Greta, we talk about her because she's the figurehead, but there is that sort of browbeating thing of children are told this sort of thing from a very young age. And
so they're being indoctrinated. They're being indoctrinated on both of these issues.
Exactly, and then they nudge their parents, and it's all part of an effort to try to shift things along. But when these things clash with reality, and we've seen this, of course, with things like COVID as well, when they actually clash with reality, there is no sort of mea culpa or introspection. It's just a reverse ferret and a murder. You never talk about it. I mean,
and censorship of people speaking out.
Tried to get people to be allowed to say these things on, say, COVID, and now try to get people to admit that they were wrong on these things. It's impossible to do either.
And this is it. And we should welcome the sinner who repents. I'm actually on the COVID issue, just finally, on this. Donald Trump's made another appointment, a nomination. I hope he gets to Jay Bhattacharya. I think it's Stanford University. He's one of the signatories, the authors of the Great Barrington Declaration. Yeah. People said, always let it rip on COVID. No, it was about actually making sure you basically made sure that people who were vulnerable and elderly were safe, giving them the help that they could need. Everyone else getting on with their lives, getting infected and living, as we all did, and having normal life. He was absolutely castigated. He was smeared, banned from Twitter at one point. I mean, all the things that happened to him. And yet this is now a man who could be in the next administration. I'm hoping he's going to, hopefully head up the National Institutes for Health in America. Yeah. I'm hoping this is a guy who actually can expose a lot of the documents which show, again, all these policies on lockdown were completely plucked out of thin air and weren't actually reality, but he was censored.
Trump's election is not just about Donald Trump. It is a rejection of people seeing others lie to them in front of their eyes and refuse to accept these things. I mean, the big thing, of course, was the lab leak. Oh, what could it have been? This one lab that happens to be in the city that deals with this direct thing. No, you can't say that, you're a racist. I'm sorry, what? Now we're going to take all of this stuff online, you're not going to be allowed to read it, you're not going to be... And now it is sort of pretty much accepted, yeah, guys, whoops, about that. But it was the fact that, you know, in this country and in the United States, it was clamped down on so hard, a perfectly reasonable assumption to say it might have something to do with the laboratory.
And
was castigated as racist and all fake science,
so
anti-science.
Obvious to me, it is.
It was the nuttiness of it.
But crucially also, the shutting down the debate. We've had that on climate. You can't go on the BBC and give the view that actually you don't think that the climate change is an issue. You're not allowed to do that on the BBC.
If it snows and you don't say it's climate crisis.
Ofcom actually could... Oh, I mean, they could actually, you know, you're in breach of the licence if you said they genuinely consider this to be settled science. Same as on lockdown, same as on, you know, and the trans issue. Or, you know, get all these newspapers, the IPSO, the requirements that they would refer to, even a male rapist, because you can only be a male if you're a rapist under English law, referring to them as she and her. I mean, we are in mad territory.
Well,
thank God people are talking out.
And then, of course, you get BBC Verify, who go, well, we've spoken to Greta, or we've spoken to the male rapist, and they say this isn't happening at all, and you need to listen to them.
Absolutely.
And you think, oh, my taxpayers' money,
one of our callers said, where's BBC Verify when you need them? Absolutely. Well, look, let's talk about the BBC case, and indeed that case at the Supreme Court right now with a fantastic guest. Mara Yamauchi is a former elite athlete. She was a long-distance runner. She's an Olympian. She's also an advisor on the advisory group of Sex Matters, who are part of the Supreme Court case over what is a woman. Mara, thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Really appreciate joining us. Can we talk first of all about this BBC case? Because we had to be really careful. We put the wording out on social media, actually, and how we talked about this, because it's very difficult when you get into small words. But the BBC has sparked controversy by naming Barbara Banda a player who plays with women as a female player, but who has nevertheless failed sex eligibility rules in the Africa Cup of Nations, and indeed to go and transfer to Real Madrid, but being named as BBC's Women's Footballer of the Year 2024. What is this controversy about?
Well, there's plenty of evidence that Banda is male with a disorder of sex development. There are allegations that Banda refused to lower testosterone. The only people who need to lower testosterone to play in women's sports are males. You know, refused permission to play in the Africa Cup of Nations, as you said, failed sex tests. All this evidence points to Banda having a male DSD. And these males go through normal male puberty. They have testes, XY chromosomes, male levels of testosterone. It is unfair. And yet, you know, we're all expected to just go along with
play along with. But this is the thing. I mean, we've had various cases. Samaya, we've had Latif, you know, the boxer in the Olympics, controversially winning, you know, punching a woman in the face. Woman literally going, you know what? I don't have a chance getting out of here alive. I'm calling it. And we've had these controversies, and they've come to the fore. And thank goodness they have, because it's happening across sport, across the world. But this is very different from, say, trans women. Well, let's call them what they are: men who identify as trans. Where they say, you know, I'm a man, I've grown up with them as a man, you know, my birth certificate says that, this is what I am, I've gone through male puberty, but I now identify as if I'm a woman, I'm now going to compete with women in sport. And of course, we know, of course, they have an inbuilt male physical and indeed, you know, testosterone advantage that stays with them for life, no matter what they do. That's different, isn't it, from these males who've basically been misidentified at birth, where they are quite clearly, when you look at their chromosomes, their testosterone levels, their body developing in puberty, they quite clearly are male. But at the time of birth, they've been possibly, you know, they're not quite sure, and they've identified them as female, and actually that's wrong. So in a way, I feel, you know, I know it's not Barbara's fault that Barbara has been raised as a girl and now a woman, but you only have to look at Barbara. And seeing the video of Barbara being told she's won this award and all her female players, you know, teammates clapping away and cheering for her, but you can see his physicality. You can see the muscle density, the arms, the shoulders, the breast. The completely flat breast. He's quite clearly a male.
Yeah, as you said, this is not a trans case, but the similarity between DSDs, the issue of DSDs and trans, is that this is bringing male advantage into the female category. The female category exists for the sole purpose of excluding male advantage. Yeah. So it's ludicrous. But we've been over this so many times before, but what for me is most important about this case is the BBC, the public broadcaster, allegedly impartial, independent and truthful. In its charter, it says its duty is to educate, inform, has deliberately misled people by omitting all this key information on all the information they've put out about this award. So anybody reading the stuff the BBC have published...
Wouldn't know anything about this. Oh, there's a tweet congratulating Barbara, and then there's another tweet giving a whole load of information, doesn't mention any of this controversy at all.
None of the stuff about elevated levels of testosterone, failing a sex test, none of that was included by the BBC. So if you read it, you would believe that Banda is female. And the voting in the final round was by readers of the BBC website who have been misled by the BBC about the sex of this person. It's a complete sham brought on us by the BBC, which is, as I said, allegedly impartial.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I loved, as always, J.K. Rowling's response to this. So he wrote, presumably the BBC decided this was more time efficient than going door to door to spit directly in women's faces. But the thing I find extraordinary is the female team players clapping away, happily smiling, and we've seen that again and again, haven't we, when males have taken female prizes in sport and they're having to clap away, and we find out afterwards that actually they're basically told, if you don't smile and play nicely, you're out, you'll be accused of being a bigot, you'll be out of the team. We know there's a lot of pressure on these women, but also people like the Lionesses, England's women's football team, why don't they speak out? I implored them a bit earlier on the show. Speak out and say you're at the top of your game. If you all speak out together, and again, this is not transphobic. It's not anti these men. We're not attacking, Barbara Banda. This is about fairness for women in sport, a level playing field.
Yeah. I think it's fear of being called a transphobe, a bigot, a Nazi, losing income, losing contracts. But, if you have a man on your team in a women's football competition, maybe you are going to keep quiet. But,
because you do better. When you win everything.
Sooner or later, there's going to be a man on the opposing team. So, myself, Sharon Davis, Martina Navratilova, other older retired athletes, we've all been speaking up. Some current, younger, still competing athletes have spoken up, but not many.
No,
absolutely. Competing athletes of both sexes and more retired male athletes need to speak up on this now, because women's sport is going to be dead in a few years.
Well, this is it. We've only just seen women's sport becoming a real thing, where there is money, where there's adulation, where the number of people who watch, say, women's Euros finals and World Cup finals, and the quality of the sport, and it's only got good quality because women are now able to do it full time because there's money in it. But as soon as there's money in it, and a load of men can say, oh, I think I'll go and have a go at that. I'm not good enough for the men's team, but I'm definitely good enough for the women's team. We are going to see in 10 years' time, there will be no women in sport because it'll all be men claiming they're women.
Exactly right. Now there's money in women's sport. All the men come along and decide they want to join in. We've been here before. The 3 medalists in the Rio 800 metres for women were male. Sports officials everywhere should have looked at that and said, this is wrong. We must protect women's sport. But instead what we have is everybody going, oh, yeah, I'll have a bit of that. It's, now we have it in boxing. There's several of them in football.
Yeah.
If sports officials don't get a grip on this, women's sport is going to be dead. And it's all about money. Banda will be making millions. Khalif has been on the cover of Vogue making millions. Semenya has retired having made millions. All that money should have gone to female athletes, and instead it's gone to males.
Yeah, and of course, and Sharon Davies has made this point brilliantly over the years. And again, she had a massive cost, even as a retired athlete, lost loads of work. Even the charity work she was doing that was unpaid, she lost that. Horrible bigot. And in fact, a wonderful, wonderful ambassador for women's sport. And for her, it was back. She had to compete against testosterone-injected female athletes from Eastern Europe, and she felt that was so unfair. You couldn't win a gold against these people. And that's the thing. It's not just the person not winning gold. world. It's the woman who's not winning silver or not winning bronze, and the woman who doesn't get on the podium at all, the woman who doesn't get on the team at all, the woman who doesn't get the chance to go and train with the team and possibly get on it because she's not good enough because there are men in those roles. The knock-on effect of this impacts many, many thousands of women and their chances.
I totally sympathise with Sharon, and I am still owed money from the 2010 London Marathon because of doping. I haven't lost what Sharon lost, but I know what it's unfair to be robbed by cheats. But, you know, women's sport is going to be dead soon unless people speak up.
Yeah.
And the BBC has a great responsibility in having caused millions of people to misunderstand this issue.
Yep.
And I strongly urge people to go and look up hecheated.org, the website. This lists all the money and medals, trophies, team places stolen by males from female athletes.
Yeah.
It's going on in the UK constantly. In my own sport athletics.
And people constantly say, oh, God, what's the issue? Why are you so upset about it? It's only a couple of people. It really isn't. Can I also just get you finally on this quite absurd case in lots of ways being brought in the Supreme Court, the fact this had to be brought, looking at what the legal definition of a woman is and whether if you're legally changing from male to female, which you're not, of course, officially you might be, whether that piece of paper in any way impacts basically sex discrimination laws, equality laws, which are about your biological reality, not a piece of paper that you can wave about.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that the highest court in the land is addressing the question, what is a woman, just shows us the level of insanity the world has reached.
Yep.
Everybody knows what a woman is. Small children know what a woman is. The question is, do women and girls have rights to fairness, dignity, privacy, safety, etc.? That's what the Supreme Court is being asked to address. And I commend For Women Scotland for bringing this case, and Sex Matters and the several lesbian organisations fighting for women's rights. And I would have urged your listeners to consider, why isn't the Supreme Court addressing the question, what is a man? Yes. This shows you precisely what the problem is. It is men invading women's spaces. The opposite never happens. So
Absolutely.
It's an extremely misogynistic movement.
Absolutely. I totally nailed it. Mara, it's such a pleasure to have you on the show. Mara Yamauchi is a former elite athlete, Olympian no less, as a long-distance runner and an advisory group member of Sex Matters who were involved in that case. Thank you so much for joining us. I mean, just speaking just so much sense. Benedict Spence, I think she absolutely nailed it there with the point is we're never asking what is a man. We're never worrying about what's happening with so-called trans men, i.e. women who identify as if they're men, not worrying about them going into, male-only spaces, male-only prisons. They don't do that, funnily enough. We're not worried about that. Why not?
Because there isn't a physical advantage there, of course.
Ta-ta!
I tell you what, though,
Is that amazing?
The more that we have this, the more that we have this conversation, I just think, actually, you know what? I'm okay with this, though. I'm okay with this because I'm going to become an Olympian. I've decided I'm going to become women's Olympic luge champion because clearly, all it takes is me to rock up, moustache or not. In fact, this is probably more likely to make me accepted and say, well, this is what I'm going to do. This is how I'm going to make my fortune, make my name. Yeah. I'm going to finally get out from under your shadow. In fact, I'm going to challenge you. Why don't you go up against me? And we're going to
as I said, my only Olympic sport is loading the dishwasher.
And you're very good at it. But I still reckon I'm better than you. Because I'm a man.
I'll challenge you. You know what? If I was the leader of the Dems, we could do a TikTok video about a challenging...
Should we play FIFA? That would be entertaining. I don't know what you think.
I have no idea.
You end up hitting me over the head with the controller through frustration.
I would do that anyway. That'd be the first moment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. We're talking about EVs. We're talking about the madness. Where's BBC Verify when it comes to this? There's a man, effectively, a man. Let's be honest. I'm not having a go at Barbara Banda. I'm really sorry this happened to you. I'm really sorry you were misidentified at birth, but you're a man. You've got no business playing in women's sport. You failed sex eligibility test. People say, failed a testosterone test. Yeah, women can't have that level of testosterone. It's impossible for them to have it because they're not men. I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of this. The Women's Footballer of the Year being a man, the madness of what is going on the EV cars. I'd love to hear your thoughts. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. This is Talk.
can see what happened to Hezbollah over the past year since it decided to start a war on the side of Hamas. Hezbollah lost much of its senior leadership, including top warlord Hassan Nasrallah and his successors, many of its senior fighters, its jihad council, and right on Israel's border. We're talking a few football fields away from the villages in northern Israel. You go over a couple hills, you're inside Lebanon, you're in the villages. Hezbollah in these villages had a massive military infrastructure, rockets, tunnels, positions that would enable Hezbollah to carry out a surprise invasion of Israel.
The UK on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer, even, and Benedict Spence, who's about to become an Olympic women's athlete, because, hey, that's what men are doing now. Yes, indeed. Lots of calls, lots of texts coming. We had a huge number in about EVs, and basically the government expects to water down their strict net zero rules on car manufacturers selling cars that aren't electric cars. 15 grand per car they get fined for that. And basically Vauxhall has said, we're going to close down our Luton factory, and that's going to cost 1,100 jobs. Other manufacturers saying we're going to close ours down as well. But I'm asking your reaction to this, because as I've always said, net zero plans and rules, they simply don't survive contact with the real world. Jane says, water down, net zero is a scam and needs abandoning completely. We need to drill, dig and frack and start manufacturing in the UK. Clayton says they're not good enough. If a product is better than its alternatives, you don't need subsidies and incentives to purchase them. Exactly. Arthur says motorists are sitting tight and keeping what they've got for several reasons. The EV fad is led by tax-friendly business lease options. That'll see a massive glut of unwanted 3-year-old EVs in the garage forecourts. The greener option is the car you look after for 12 or more years. And Alex says if electric cars were good enough, people would buy them anyway. There would be no need for quotas. Exactly, that's what I keep saying. Let's get to your calls and your messages also on Barbara Bander, a player who has failed sex eligibility rules because he's been misidentified as a female when he's actually male, as the Women's Footballer of the Year of the BBC. David says it's ridiculous but unsurprising as the constant brainwashing and indoctrination and generally shoving things list down our throat continues. Sonia says it's a dude who failed his testosterone test in his native country, but we Brits deny the facts before our very eyes because we're desperate to be seen to be decent. But it's indecent to the dreams of schoolgirls who dream of being a footy star and seeing a man win this award. Keith says, sums up the woke BBC perfectly. Stephen points out it was voted for by the public. Yes, it was voted for by the public because they didn't know that he was a man. Let's go to the phone calls. Jan is on the line and she's in Cheshire. She's called 0344 499 1000 to have her say on Barbara Bander winning this award. Good afternoon to you, Jan. What do you want to say?
Oh, hi, Julia. Yeah. So on the Barbara Bander thing, I do think the BBC shortlisted him. I suspect they didn't think he would win because he's unknown in this country. People don't know the name Bander. And I think that poll was manipulated. It's easily done. After, if the call to arms goes out on someone like Reddit.
Absolutely.
Or Blue Sky, whereas that's where they've all gone now because you can't call a man on Blue Sky.
Yeah.
Because that's where all the snowflakes are.
Yeah. This is a supposed alternative to X/Twitter because apparently X is so toxic for people on the left.
Yeah, because they can't bear to hear the truth.
Yeah.
So all you need there is somebody who passes the message on. They go onto the BBC website. Yeah. I just don't believe people in this country voted for Bander.
I completely agree with you. And we know the BBC website is very international as well. And a lot of people may be looking at English-speaking countries in Africa because he's an African player. I mean, but this is the thing exactly. These things get manipulated. But it's like this campaign. But who wants to push this? Why are people doing this? What is their motivation?
Well, while I've got the opportunity, and it's still on football, the big villains fans in this country are the actual FA. They are allowing actual men, to play in women's football. Yep. And I know people say, why do the women clap? They have to go along with it. There's a 17-year-old girl got a 6-match ban for asking a man with a beard on the opposition team if he was male. And she's the one that got banned. They called her through a court, embarrassed her, humiliated her, and this is why people have to keep quiet. And I don't agree that we should be kind to Banda. I don't think we should. These men are shameless.
He was, no, but it's different from a trans man, or someone claiming, and Leah Thomas, I don't believe for a moment, feel free to sue me, Leah, seriously, I don't believe for a moment you think that you're actually a woman. But Barbara Banda was raised as a girl, was told, the parents said, they were told that he was a girl. There was a mistake made. I think he's a victim as well. But at the end of the day, because he's been told a lie and his parents told a lie, I don't see why, when it's blatantly obvious to everybody that he's male and the women should be losing out.
He might have thought he was female when he was younger. His parents might have thought he was female. He absolutely 100% knows now he's male. I mean, why does he think he's got no breasts? Why he's not got...
You only have to look at the footage. I mean, I know. It's just, I mean, it's embarrassing. I mean, I know what a man's shoulders look like, what a man's chest looks like compared to a woman. We're not talking about only having small breasts or being big built. You just look at the size of him compared to the women who are sitting next to him. He's a man.
He knows. The coaches know.
Everyone knows.
Everybody knows, and we all have to go along. We have to... I mean, people are still calling him she. It's a bloke.
Oh, all of the articles, because everyone does that. But again, they call, and I'm not in any way behind the same thing, but, you know, they call male rapists she, because if they say they identify as a woman. We are in proper Alice in the Wonderland, way down the rabbit hole territory. We really are. Jan, thank you so much. Great call. Appreciate that. Let's go to Tracy. She's in Somerset. Hello, Tracy.
Hello, Julia. Thank you for keeping us all sane.
Well, we try, but we are fighting a losing battle sometimes, my love.
Yes, we are. I'm coming at this from a kind of comical, different angle, in that my passion is horse sport.
Yeah.
And there's no problem like this in horse sport. But, you know, there's all sorts of different sexualities in horse sport, but you don't need to be trans, because the horse makes it an even playing field.
Right, so do men and women in horse competitions, do men and women compete against each other?
In every sport.
In every sport, because it's irrelevant.
In polo, in racing, in show jumping, in dressage, in eventing. It's a level playing field. So we don't have anyone pretending to be a woman, because they don't need to.
That is very, very interesting. So even though, you know, it's and again, and I don't think the gay and the trans have anything to do with each other at all, but plenty of people who are out as gay, that's not an issue at all. There is no sort of no prominent player who's trans.
They don't feel the need to pretend to be something they're not. They can be who they want to be.
Very interesting. Absolutely fascinating. Tracy, thank you very much indeed. Benedict Spencer, I mean, this, look, you're still plotting, aren't you? Your Olympic future as a woman. The thing is, in most sports, actually, I mean, other than football and you know, tennis and golf,
other sports
there actually isn't a huge amount of money in a lot of sports. Even a lot of our, you know, Olympic athletes, you know, unless you get a good sponsorship, unless you become a big name, you know, you're on the, you know, Saturday night in 2012 Olympics, you don't end up making a load of money. But certainly women in most sports don't, certainly compared to men. And it's interesting, this has only been happening since there's been some women in some money in women's sport.
Yeah, no, that's the thing, and it's always going to attract people on that basis.
Men.
Yes, all right. It's going to attract rather sharp-eyed chaps who see an opportunity to make a quick buck.
What do most men think about this? Because I always thought that sport was going to be the real battleground on this, and that was the one that once we got the men, and particularly once you get dads who've got daughters who play sport, that is when, because women are so worried about, I don't want to be seen as not a nice person. You know what? Dads have daughters? They don't care.
No, I think most men...
They will defend their daughters.
First and foremost, I don't think most men actually know who Barbara Banda is. I
had no idea who he was till yesterday.
And I still don't actually think that the majority of male football fans know or care very much about women's football. And also, they've spent the last decade or so being browbeaten about what they themselves can say on the terraces about other players. So I think it's kind of that stage where a lot, and it might sound quite cynical, a lot of men who are not necessarily parents are kind of sat there going, well... That's unfortunate, isn't it? But we didn't want this, so it's nothing to do with us.
Not my problem. Which is fair enough. Women, call to arms. As I said, Lioness, it's time to speak out. 12:34 is the time. Up next, we're going to find out if there are any highlights at PMQs. Peter Cardwell has been watching, so we don't have to. We'll find out up next. Also going to be talking to the wonderful, the brilliant Catherine Burble-Singh, the strictest head teacher in Britain, about whether or not it is a good idea to ban mobile phones and social media use for under 16s. And what difference do mobile phones make in the classroom? We'll find out from her. This is Talk, Home of Common Sense.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Benedict Spencer with me. Joined, delighted to say, by Talk presenter and political commentator Peter Cardwell-Ranett. Good afternoon to you.
Hello, Julia.
Hello. You are here, of course, as always, to present us with the highlights of PMQs. First question, as always, because we just dropped the item otherwise, were there any highlights?
Well, I think PMQs today was a bit like the school dinners at my old primary school, OK? There was a lot of meat and potatoes, a lot of substance, but actually there was sort of tasteless. There wasn't much there at the end of it, really.
Was there any of that pink custard they called strawberry but was not strawberry flavoured, with the skin on top? I'm of that era. Yeah, I still have nightmares about that stuff.
Do you know what, the other day actually...
Was that Ed Davey? Was that the Ed Davey of school dinners?
Yes, indeed.
The strawberry custard with skin on top.
Sort of synthetic, yes.
We're talking about Ed Davey in a few minutes.
Lots of E numbers, but there was a lot of Punch and Judy. They were talking a bit about the budget and the fact that, you know, here we are 4 weeks on and we're still talking about the budget and the fallout from it.
But it's gone so well.
Well, hasn't it? And certainly talking about national insurance contributions and all the rest of it. So one thing that came up as well is this petition everybody's talking about, the millions of people who signed a petition asking for a new general election. I don't think it's going to happen, but Kemi Badenoch brought that up as well when talking about the budget. And this first clip really illustrates how I think she got under his skin this week.
Let's have a watch and a listen.
And she talks about a petition. We had a massive petition on the 4th of July in this country. We spent years taking our party from a party of protest to a party of government. They're hurtling in the opposite direction.
What a load of nonsense, Mr. Speaker. We had
a budget in March this year, and tractors were not blockading the streets of Whitehall afterwards.
Yeah, that's kind of a bit of a put down. I don't understand. We had a petition to the full strike. No, you didn't. You had an election.
An election, yeah, exactly.
That didn't work. That was obviously a miss. You know, he basically got his quote wrong, didn't he?
Yeah, well, indeed. And I don't know about you, Julia, but having covered politics for quite a long time, I can't remember a government, especially with such a huge majority, 4 months in, that's in this much trouble.
Genuinely, I've never seen anything like it. It is crap. I mean, even Boris Johnson took a couple of years to get to this stage. This has been almost immediate, hasn't it? What other exchanges?
Well, that's sort of what Kemi Badenoch picked up on. So there were in the middle there were lots of biscuit puns, which I'm not going to bring you because they were so bad. Basically, she talked about him being away, and McVitie's away when McVitie's, the huge biscuit company, of course, talked about all the problems in the economy and they're going to have to lay off staff and so on. And he said, well, he was hobnobbing in Rio and all this kind of stuff. So she basically said, look, everything he's done is wrong. And then this is the next clip that really illustrates that point.
Right, let's see this exchange.
He is making things worse. Everyone is unhappy. Isn't it a good thing that the Chancellor is an expert at customer complaints?
Mr. Speaker, I think she's just read out the charge sheet against the last government. Everything is broken. And they come here every week with absolutely nothing to offer except complaints. Nothing constructive, no new ideas. They don't know what they're doing from one day to the next. Living in this fantasy world that everything was fine, apparently, for 14 years. Well, the country's fed up with those fantasies. They've got rid of those fantasies. We're going to take the hard decisions. They're jumping on every bandwagon that's passing. We're taking the country forward.
3, 2, 1, back in the room. I mean, genuinely, I do that a lot, but genuinely, he's still talking.
Into
he's
the eyes,
still
not
going.
around the eyes.
Yeah, we could have cut that clip by half, couldn't we? Good grief. But this is the thing. So what interesting, for those watching that, you can see you've got Bridget Phillipson, I think, on one side, and you've got Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, on the other side. And I like that little dig that, you know, customer complaints. That's kind of, she's kind of unravelled as his super-duper Chancellor. Oh, first woman Chancellor, no one cares. Totally irrelevant. We've had how many female Prime Ministers? In the last 5 minutes, even. But it's just extraordinary how much, you know, her CV has just completely
this is an issue that's going to go on. I mean, we've seen all the memes, and they just keep coming as well. This is not going away. So yes, there were matters of substance. They did talk about the health service, they did talk about national insurance, they did talk about farming at various aspects of Prime Minister's questions. We also heard from Stephen Flynn of the SNP saying it's the BBC's anti-scam awareness week. Apparently, has Keir Starmer been taken in by any scams? Anybody telling him things that aren't true?
That's quite good fun.
Etc. And then at one point, Keir Starmer sort of replied and said, well, actually, isn't it, you know, his colleagues will like to see Stephen Flynn in this house because he's standing to be a member of the SNP in Scotland. So there were some reasonable bits, but I think not a classic PMQs.
No, exactly. But I mean, I think more things are happening over on social media now, aren't they, where most people are paying attention in politics. Ed Davey, who did so many sort of stunts during the general election campaign.
You're not going to play this to me, are you?
I hate to tell you I'm going to play. Sorry, everybody.
I'm not sure I can do it a third time.
But can I just say at this point, don't watch the YouTube. Just have us on the radio so you don't have to watch this. Seriously. This is Ed Davey issuing a challenge on TikTok with a really weird dad dance to Keir Starmer to play a football computer game. Okay, I'm literally, I don't play computer games, you may have guessed, called FIFA, which you all have heard of, but not, you know, it's not my world. This is Ed Davey. Sorry, everyone.
Bring the boom song, bring the booming out here, bring the boom was the song of the summer this year.
Put them on the boom meter, working a rate. Put the fries in the bag now, already ate it.
Boom and doom in the restaurants, making some noise, taking the field.
Yeah, so just again, apologies for that. That's not him. That's not Ed Davey singing. You've done something in a past life. I'm going to keep playing that to you forever.
Clearly.
But I mean, it's a challenge for him. It's a charity challenge.
Yes.
And even Christine Jardine, one of the Lib Dem MPs, said, for the love of God, Keir Starmer, please agree to this challenge so we don't have to see any more of these videos. No, but we're talking about Ed Davey, we wouldn't be otherwise. So do these things work?
Listen, Ed Davey has made a number of very dramatic interventions, certainly in the election. I think the Lib Dems did a lot better because of his stunts. I mean, they certainly caught the zeitgeist.
Falling off a paddleboard, going down slides.
You know, it's all a bit of nonsense, but actually, in the very, very busy, noisy crazy world of politics. You do have to rise above that and in some way make an impression, and he's done that. We're talking about it today.
I know. I mean, shame on me. Shame on me. Let's also talk about politics overseas. American election. We know who didn't win. It was Kamala Harris. I think she's taking it quite badly. I think there may have been a wine box or two included, but for some reason she thought it was a good idea to put out, I think it's like a 9-minute video. She clearly doesn't have any members of staff to go, no.
You're not going to play all 9 minutes,
Kamala,
are you?
I'm not going to play all 9 minutes. I really can't. No one could watch all 9 minutes. But this is what Kamala Harris had to say to those Democrats who campaigned for her, who voted for her, and basically this has very strong vibes of drunk women in the toilets of a nightclub. One of them has just been dumped or found out that her boyfriend is having an affair. Those are the vibes we're getting here. This is Kamala Harris. I'm sure a wine box has been consumed at this point. Have a watch and a listen.
I just have to remind you, don't you ever let anybody take your power from you. And you have the same ability to engage and inspire. So don't ever let anybody or any circumstance take your power from you.
These are wise words, Peter. Don't let anyone take your power away from you.
Storm Burt took my power from me. The lights flickered for a while, so maybe she should talk about that. I mean, that is very... I remember there's a particular nightclub. It would be unfair to
name it. Yeah.
It would be unfair to talk about the venue as it's known. And I said to a friend of mine, "What's the vibe of this venue?" And she said, "It's very much." I'll not use the word she used, but she said, it's very much you Trump, no you Trump. So that's very much the vibe of that. And I can't imagine her in a nightclub saying, don't let anyone take your power from you.
He's not worth it. It's got those vibes. He's not worth it.
Leave it.
Leave it. No, you can do better than him, girlfriend. The thing is, Benedict Spence, we played that. We have cruelly played that to you a couple of times. But it's almost like she has totally believed the sort of the Oprah Winfrey hype, which was, they're all dropping you like a stone, sweetheart. But I mean, the woman is deranged.
Also, she's quite literally going to have her power taken from her in about 6 weeks.
That's
going to happen.
And to be fair, if you're going to have that taken from you by a guy who quite literally did stir an insurrection 4 years ago, if you're that bad, I'd take to the bottle as well, because this is about as embarrassing a rejection as it can possibly be. But this is the default response, though, isn't it? Whenever the things don't go the way of these people, they retreat and they cry and they don't reflect on anything. It's always the world is harsh and everything's mean to me.
I would say the same with the Conservatives. I think an awful lot of Conservatives have not got... No one who didn't vote Labour, who want the staunch Labour vote at first, people didn't en masse go and vote Labour out of the blue. They got the same vote in July as they got in 2019 with Jeremy Corbyn. People just went, you know what? The Tories are terrible. This lot can't be any worse. It turns out they are worse, but who knew that? But the key thing... I did warn you guys. But this is the thing, and the no one, it seems to me, in the Conservative Party is actually going, oh, I wonder why they did that. I wonder why people opted for them over us. Well, yeah, a little bit of introspection.
And it's easy to go into those aspects of saying, well, the public got it wrong. They just didn't know. They didn't understand. Well, they did. They did understand. They did know what they were. It's the classic back to the Brexit. People didn't know what they were doing. They did.
The voters never get it wrong by definition. So good to get you in the studio. Thank you very much. I apologise for playing all of those videos to you. Peter Carbottle, presenter and political commentator.
I'll find it in my heart to forgive you.
When are you next on?
On Friday at 4 o'clock. I'm with Jeremy today at 4:20.
Fantastic. Look forward to that. Thank you very much. 12:48 is the time. Up next, the wonderful, the brilliant woman who will never have her power taken from her girlfriend, Catherine Birdwell-Singh. This is...
you know, for the BBC to choose someone like that really is, you know, a little bit of a kick in the teeth for women. There are so many talented women playing football. They should have stayed away from this.
And you have to assume as well that the people who, particularly athletes who get themselves involved in you know, high-level elite athletics, whether it's boxing or running or playing football, you know, they're doing it for the money, aren't they? They're doing it for a reason which is other than just, you know, the joy of the sport, because they're becoming successful and they're becoming rich.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. The laughter has subsided. Let's get back to the serious business of our kids and what on earth is going on with them when it comes to social media in and out of school, what they're doing in their classrooms. Let's talk to the wonderful Catherine Burble-Singh. She's the founder and head teacher of the Michaela Community School and joins us now. Good afternoon to you.
Afternoon, Julia.
Thank you so much for joining us. Now, two different stories I want to talk to you about. One is a poll of adults, 2/3 of whom are basically supporting the idea of a ban on under-16s being allowed to access social media on their mobile phones. This is something that Australia is debating at the moment and wanting to bring in. Would you support that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, one of the problems that parents have is they want to ban their children from going on social media, but then their children say, but that's where all my friends communicate.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be left out. I'm not going to have any friends. And so it's very difficult for one individual family to ban things for their children when it comes to tech. But if that were to be done across the board in the way that we ban alcohol to children and sex and marriage and driving and smoking and so on, then it no longer becomes a problem because children just are not online.
It's just not. But I mean, guys, we know that there will still be kids who drink and do all the other things and have on, you know, sex below the illegal age. But that's not a reason to not stop it for everybody. The thing about this is a lot of social media, there's the horrible thing of girls sort of doing these sort of page 3 pouting pictures and then desperate for likes and flaunting their bodies in, I think, a really rather tragic, sad way and rather dangerous way as well. And there's, you know, bullying and there's all of that. There's also a lot of social media where it's just a way of communicating ideas. And I love X, Twitter. I use WhatsApp all the time, but I don't know any young people who use WhatsApp. They all communicate on, I don't know, Snapchat, or probably something I've never, ever heard of. Is part of the worry is that we don't know where they are and what they're doing.
Yes, well, and often when you do find out, it's really quite scary.
Yeah.
The fact is that they're children, and so they need protecting. And you don't say to your 4-year-old, okay, off you go, you figure out how to cross the street. You know, you have to show them gradually over years. And so, yes, a child at 12, 13, 14 is extremely vulnerable. They meet all kinds of people online that their parents don't know about. They will then lie to their parents about what they're up to.
Yeah.
It's also the kind of conversation. It's really quite vulgar and horrifying, the kind of conversations that they will get into on social media.
Do you think most parents actually have no idea what their kids are doing on social media?
So just 2 nights ago, I had a Year 7 parents' evening where
So that's an 11-year-old, yeah.
An 11-year-old, that's right. All the parents are sitting there, and I show them some of the things that we found on children's phones, and the parents cannot believe it. I mean, some mothers, you know, people are gasping. They're horrified. They cannot believe it. And I say to them, if you don't want your children to be involved in conversations like this, you need to take away the phone.
Yeah.
But I know that the parents are up against their child saying, but my friends, and so on and so forth.
But aren't parents also part of the problem? Because actually, it's often not. They're just up against the other kids. They go, well, Mum, you know, that's what everyone else is on this particular social media. Is actually the parents want their kids to be on social media. I see parents all the time. My God, they give their mobile phones to babies, to toddlers, which I absolutely, makes me feel physically sick. Give your child a book. Give your child a crayon on a train journey, for the love of God. Talk to your children. Go crazy. thing. But actually, a lot of the time, it's the parents. They want to sit on their phones. They want to sit scrolling Facebook or Snapchat or whatever it is they're on that week, rather than actually engaging with their children and bothering to speak to them.
That's right. So we do a lot of work. I mean, I was making suggestions about board games, sitting down and watching a television program or a film with your children.
Together, yeah.
About the ideas of a book that you might have read together and so on. Exactly, the idea of being together. The problem with the phone is that it divides families, so no one's ever actually talking to each other. And it's the same thing if phones are in schools, because the children are outside at break time and they don't actually speak to each other. And that the way in which they interact is by sending each other texts. It's crazy. And we are really going to go off a cliff here as a country. I don't think people realize just how bad things are and how it changes children's characters. You know, the children who I've seen, I always play videos for my families to show them, look, here's a mom who took away the phone, and every single one of those moms will tell you, my child is a different child.
Yeah.
He's come back to being his young, innocent self. He turned into this horrible person, and now I've got my child back. That's what they always say.
Yeah, and it is fascinating. And I think most people just simply don't realise. And again, I'm always amazed. People go, well, I have to do it to keep my kid quiet. And you think, wow, if your kid won't do anything else or won't behave because they haven't got their phone, then you've already lost that battle. My worry is, though, I do have a free speech issue and a sensitive issue, which is like, how on earth are they going to make sure the kids aren't on it other than verifying that an adult is an adult? At that point, we're all going to have to be registered, and I think that we are in some dangerous territory given what's happened over recent years on issues about, trans issues, climate issues, lockdown, like vaccines. I worry there would be issues there. But I'm also fascinated, just briefly, 18% of teachers, according to another new poll, say that they think a ban on phones in schools would improve pupil behaviour. But just 80%, so fewer than 1 in 5 teachers think that banning mobile phones in the classroom, in the schools, would actually make a difference. I mean, surely 100% of teachers should think that.
Well, no, actually, I would be one of those teachers who would say it wouldn't improve behaviour.
Oh.
Now, obviously, I'm the strictest headmistress in Britain, so I believe in good behaviour.
Yeah.
But you see, the thing is, one of the reasons why, and I mean, lots of people wouldn't say this, but one of the reasons why phones are allowed out in schools is because a number of teachers quite like it, because it just keeps the children quiet.
Yeah. That's yes. You need to be tackling the other end of the problem. Catherine Burble-Singh, always good to talk to you. Thank you so much, founder and head teacher of the Michaela Community School. Benedict Spencer, I mean, are you young enough that there were mobile phones around when you were at school?
Yeah, there were. We had to hand them in at the front office and
there we are.
didn't get to play with them.
I don't know why people think it's complicated. I have to say, you'll never guess what Ian Collins is here. He's sitting there on his phone.
I am. Well, I'm actually really quite disturbed that Benedict is of an age where he was at school with mobile phones.
The weird thing is, he looks like he's 85 and a retired colonel.
I mean, I look at Benedict, like I want to call him Dad or something, you know.
Okay, with some whole really weird stuff is going on in the studio
Life was pretty tough for 14-year-olds.